right, we're about at that time. Actually, we're 3 minutes over that time. Do I have Brett and John on?
They are.
Okay, well, excellent.
Just go ahead.
We have a special guest in the room, which is amazing. Our special guest is already left the room.
Yeah, back in there.
All right, let me know when we're ready to go live. All right, well, good afternoon. Really glad to have everyone back in the room together for the next part of our board meeting. We are headed into our session, which is our academic and student affairs. I have lost my script, and so we are streaming live on YouTube and Zoom. We have 2 of our regents that are calling in, and luckily, I'm going to pass this committee over to Chair Cerna to take it away.
Nice ad lib there. I think Brett Blankenship was enjoying it very much. Yeah, she's here all week. Yeah. Welcome everybody to the Board of Regents Student Affairs and Student Life Committee meeting. We are, as was mentioned, we're live over YouTube. Also, the link to YouTube can be found on the Board of Regents website. We have some proposed action items to take up. The first is proposed changes to WAC 50426 standards of conduct for students. We're going to hear from Provost and Pullman Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton to my left. Interim Vice President for Student Affairs, Ellen Taylor as well. Come on in there.
So I'm going to turn this over to Ellen Taylor, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. So that's an update.
Oh, that's right. She's no longer an interim. I'm sorry.
Update to her title. I just asked Ellen to take it away.
Yeah,
for both these items.
Absolutely, yes. So we actually have 2 proposed 2 action items for you all to be considering, and I guess you will vote on these tomorrow. The first, as Regent Cerna said, is proposed changes to WAC 50426, standards of conduct for students, and the second is proposed changes to WAC 50428, policies and regulations applying to all student organizations. In September, when we were on the Pullman campus, your last meeting, Karen Metzner went into some detail about the proposed changes to WAC 50426. So I won't repeat all of that. There's nothing different in there. And actually same for the other one. The piece I will add is that we had, as is required by law, we had public hearings on both of these sets of proposed changes in October. And there were no comments, either oral or written, submitted to the university about either of these sets of changes. So I am, rather than belaboring what you all had in September, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I think there's 2 items we've been kind of looking at here for a while, so I don't know that we have that many questions or any questions at all. And if not, we can just move ahead.
That's fine with me.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay.
Give me the shortest amount of time.
Wow.
Well, you know, efficiency, as they say. All right. We also have an information item, and this is going to be covered by Provost and Pullman Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton.
Thank you. I think we may have a special guest on the Zoom. Kim, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, excellent. I'll introduce it, and then if you could annotate, correct, add to what I say, and then if there are any questions, I appreciate you being here today.
You might introduce Kim.
Yes, I'm sorry. Kim, why don't you introduce yourself, if you would?
Certainly. So my name is Kim Kristen. I'm the chair of the Digital Technology and Culture Department and a professor in the department as well.
So this is an item that is approved under delegated authority. So it's an information item but it's a renaming of the School of Information to the Department of Digital Culture, Digital Technology and Culture. This was approved through our faculty senate. And when that happens, then I send a memo to the president to ask him to approve it under delegated authority, which he did. In your packet, you have the memo that comes from the Dean of Arts and Sciences with the justification that I'm sure Kim Kristen was probably the one who had a hand in much of the justification. But I know that the goal is to be in better alignment with the faculty manual as well as with the intention of the establishment of the unit in the first place. So would you say just a few words about that, about the intention behind this renaming?
Well, just a teeny bit of history. So Digital Technology and Culture, DTC, as a program has existed both in Vancouver and Pullman for well over 15 years, but it had been nested in the English department. We merged with data analytics to form the School of Information in 2018. And however, as Elizabeth sort of alluded to, data analytics was formed under a specific set of guidelines. And so we found out that data analytics really couldn't be nested within the school because of how they're aligned and their funding and the specific obligations that they're supposed to adhere to and being on the Everett campus. So we retooled that and went back and formed the Department of Digital Technology and Culture as a standalone department, because as a school, we would have had to have more than one department. So I don't know if that answers your question or if you want more information.
Any questions for Kim?
I'd like to just understand the rules around data analytics a little bit more, because I never really understood. I knew there was something about data analytics, but I never really understood what it was.
Yeah. So my understanding, and I'm looking at Paul too here as well, was that, do you want to say a few words about the sort of history of data analytics? I know that it has funding that went to both the College of Arts and Sciences and to our College of Engineering, and we offer it at multiple campuses, but maybe you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so data analytics was a program that the legislature funded, and in the funding, it said that it would be a program at the Everett campus. And while there was a presence at the Everett campus, it was pretty much system-wide, and it resided on the Pullman campus. And so what we've done is really positioned it to do more of what it was originally intended to do, which was to focus on the Everett campus. And then so essentially data analytics is the first program that's fully administered on the Everett campus, because all of our other programs are actually administered on the Pullman campus. So we actually administer the data analytics program now, and still system-wide, but it's administered at the Everett campus. Does that make sense?
But it hasn't gone away.
It hasn't gone away.
It's just realigning the two programs instead of cramming them together, realigning it so that we market them. They're aligned with where they need to be. So it's not like one's gone away, but that school construct just didn't fit, didn't work. And so if it doesn't work, let's change it and do something that would.
So basically data analytics needs to be on its own because of being centered out of Everett. And I'm just trying to put this in English for me. Needs to be on its own because of being centered out of Everett. And then this combined program is system-wide administered out of Pullman. Right? Am I getting that right?
DTC.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what is the relationship now, Kim, between DTC and data analytics program?
There's no formal relationship. So our degrees are separate. The DTC degree is offered in Pullman, Tri-Cities, and Vancouver. We have a few cross-listed classes with data analytics, and we provide a data visualization minor within the tracks in data analytics. So it's not a formal relationship, but that's our curricular relationship.
I would add that I believe data analytics has strong ties to math and computer science.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that maintaining those ties were very important to the faculty in data analytics. So they supported the name change.
Yeah. So data analytics would be more on the science side, and
Science and math.
DTC would be
Science, math, stats.
on the
Engineering.
on the more
So-
in
So yeah, our
Go
students,
ahead,
our students have 5 tracks. Mainly, we do web design and development, data visualization, game design and development, digital cinema, and animation. Our students go to work for Microsoft, Boeing, Nintendo, Amazon. They really sort of bridge that. Whereas data analytics has more of a computer science and math focus. Our students are bridging creative production along with that societal effect. So they are focused on those sort of more media outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yep. I get it. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. That actually cleared a
You're
lot up
welcome.
for me.
Okay, thank you.
Any
I
other
employ many of those students.
comments or
in communications.
questions?
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
We're
And you thought you weren't presenting, Paul.
Good thing you wore a tie.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Okay, that is an information item. We want to mention that the action items that were presented today will be going to come before the board for consideration at tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting. The Regents, we conclude the Academic and Student Affairs Committee and move now to the Finance and Administration Committee. That's you, isn't it?
Thank you.
Okay.
I happen to.
You have a
find my-
script?
I do. I'm ready. Thank you.
I always thought you did this all without a script.
Yeah,
I usually do, but there's certain things you're supposed to make sure we cover, right? Thank you, Regent Serna.
You're welcome.
All right,
I'm here all
so.
week, so you know, at least the next 2 days.
So we're going to transition. You actually accomplished your meeting in half the time that
Nice,
was
thank you.
allocated.
I'm very efficient.
We're killing it. All right. So this is the big meeting.
That's why we got it done in record time, so we could go to the big meeting.
That's right. And you may have seen a message that Des sent out encouraging everyone to take a look at your packets of information because what I have encouraged our leadership team to do is not to read the slides or to review the slides that were already in your packet because the assumption is you've already had the opportunity to do so. And to be able to allow this time today for a real dialogue and questions and answers. I also need to ensure that we complete all of our content in the time period that we have allocated. And we weren't able to do that at the last meeting, which I very much appreciate our first presenter who had their entire presentation not be able to be presented at our last Board of Regents meeting and therefore is at the top of the agenda with some extra time today. And we don't want that to happen at this meeting. So I am going to make sure that we stay on track with the time that's been allocated. And and that we allow for a break because this is a pretty significant amount of content that we try to cover in our finance and administration committee. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer update, our Associate Vice President, Chief Compliance and Risk Officer, Charles Kemzel.
All right, and I have a timer up here, so this is great.
You do,
Thank you very
yeah.
much. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. And while I'm not going to read from the slides, because I do really want to allow time for discussion, I do want to just go through them initially, partly because you know, the work that I do is really the work of a lot of people. I'm just the person who's up here reporting. So I want to highlight the work of some colleagues around the system and all of the improvements that we've made, both in the compliance and the risk management area. And we'll start with compliance. I'm happy to have questions at any time, but I tend to go very quickly through slides, so I think we'll have plenty of time at the end. So one thing we've been doing is building out the fundamentals for a compliance system. I haven't gotten to the stage yet of drafting a compliance plan because I could see that there were elements of a compliance plan that we didn't have. And one of the big ones was a very good learning management system. And so I want to give a huge nod to our colleagues from HRS. They have implemented a brand new learning management system that has a compliance element in it. We can now actually readily and easily assign training to individuals and to positions and track that training and track the compliance. It is a game changer in terms of what we can do for training for our employees. And so they just need credit for that. And that's something that we couldn't have an effective compliance plan without that learning management system. So there's that. One thing we have done then also is build out training in areas where we've needed it, where we have compliance, where we've seen compliance issues. So last time we have EP15 training that's now annual. The big change and the big improvements we've made in this since I talked to you last is we now have cybersecurity training required on an annual basis. And we later today, you're going to see the ethics policy. And that will also implement annual ethics training requirements for our employees. So all those three areas are high risk areas for us as an institution in the realm of compliance. And so we're pretty happy to have all of that and to have the training platform that allows us to do that. The next big change we've had, and you've already heard from Danielle Hess, but we did create the Policy and Governance Office, which actually allows us to bring governance into the compliance plan, into the compliance group. And it has really made what we can do much more holistic. You know, we have compliance, we have risk management, and we have governance. And so we can coordinate all of that and they all overlap. You know, it's a Venn diagram that hardly, I mean, the circles, they separate a little bit, but not very much. And so we've already seen the benefit of that, and just being able to look at the structure at a system level and address issues has been super helpful. We're rolling out a new policy that for policy development, helping people develop policies, providing substantive assistance in that regard. You've seen with the delegation work that Danielle has presented here today, improvements there. And then again, the ethics policy has been a big change. An area for us, I think that you all probably heard about even before I got here, health sciences compliance. We are growing into our healthcare services and our health sciences program. That means we're growing into that compliance program as well. We've made tremendous achievements. Our assistant director for health sciences compliance has done great work. There is a lot of work yet to do. I mean, even today, I've been talking with folks around the room to think about how we can centralize our system-wide health sciences compliance to minimize the issues that we are seeing, because we do continue to see issues in this area. But that said, we're making great inroads. And we finally have some of the fundamental policies in place that we needed to have as a hybrid entity under HIPAA, which is just, it's a stepping stone, but it's a big one for us. And I want to be sure and give credit to the great team that's been working on that. And we cooperate a lot with our Chief Information Security Officer in that. That's a dual team for sure. The one thing that our compliance and civil rights unit does for sure is promote and actually build out some of the building blocks for diversity, equity, inclusion, because it is there to protect the civil rights of our whole community. And so we have, and one of the things that I really want to highlight for this team, we recognize that when people file complaints with this office, and that we have to do investigations, those investigations have taken historically quite a long time. We made some real system changes to cut that period of time in half. And we did that with an understaffed office. So now the office is fully staffed, and we're just really proud of what they accomplished, and it can continue, because I still think that an average of 124 days is difficult. These investigations are hard on people. They're hard on the people who are being investigated. They're hard on the people who are witnesses. The quicker we can get through them and do them in as thorough manner as possible, the better it is for our whole community. But also so then people know that if they do come forward, that there's going to be, that the resolution is not going to be so far out that it discourages them from coming forward.
Cheryl, what is like best practice on this? Is it down closer to the 51 days or?
I think 90 days would be considered a best practice. If we can get down to 90 days, I would be really pleased. I think our whole office would be. So we're getting there. We also in CCR, we're responsible for providing affirmative action information out. And it used to be that we would just provide a spreadsheet that of all of our affirmative action data that didn't actually make that information very accessible. And being able to see this information at a glance, to me, makes us more likely to do stuff with this information, to actually have it in our mind, to be able to say, hey, we see where we can be making changes, and where we need to be focusing our efforts. And again, this is something that we are working together. I know Chris Hoyt has identified this as in her unit, a unit of measurement actually for the strategic plan. And we're really looking forward to working with her on the reporting on the affirmative action side. And then the equity lens tool process last year, when we were here, we had a great presentation actually about this whole committee, about this equity lens tool. Thanks to having Danielle in the office, she's been able to work with the committee to get this into the policy, get the policy out, get the tool up. And we just reviewed the new webpage where all of this will be made available. It should be going live in the next couple of weeks. And we'll have a process in place to systematically apply that tool to new policies and to policy changes. So we're pretty excited about that too. And that's the sort of fundamental compliance update. We're going to move into risk management at this point, but happy to come back to any part of that. And we've made, there's just so many people doing so much. We have a lot of compliance units and a lot of sort of siloed areas around, and we've worked hard to create a system across all of those units. On the risk side, operational risk, just real briefly, and then we'll get into the enterprise risk management. But one thing on the operational risk side, we have had a sort of ad hoc process for looking at proposals that present unique risk to the system and or to a particular campus. And we're starting to try to build a process around that so it is not as ad hoc. We have a risk management executive committee. And as these items come up, we are now bringing them to that committee so that we get a cross-system review of that, get suggestions, can build out around that. and identify all the parties who need to be involved so that we can really look at how best to develop whatever that project is, and how best to identify and mitigate those risks in advance rather than after the fact. Because the other thing I've been doing in this position for the past couple of years is dealing with some of those after the fact issues, and I'd much rather deal with it proactively than reactively. So that's something we'll continue to work on, and providing tools to our whole community in risk assessment, and that, as well as building out, the terminology of risk assessment, and getting people to think about that as you're thinking about moving a project forward. And then enterprise risk management. So Karen Shaw and myself, this has been our project for the past year or so, taking what had been our previous enterprise risk management process, building that out into this origami software, and working to make this an operational real-time ERM process. And it's still a work in process for sure, but you'll see here we have 122 risks. The thing I think about the heat map that I really appreciate is that most of our risks are down there in the green. And that's great news. We acknowledge that we have them, and we've got systems in place that are managing those. But we do, like any institution, we have some risk and higher risks. And this is the interesting to see our risks by category as an institution. One thing I think that about large research universities, we engage in almost every single kind of business you can imagine. We are commercializing intellectual property. We have real estate. We have finance. We take payment. I don't know what we don't do. And then we have free speech issues all the time too. So, I mean, we've got compliance issues everywhere, and it's not unique for a large institution like us to have our legal and compliance representing such a large section of the pie of our risk as a system. In fact, at the national level, this legal compliance violations are seen as a very high risk area right now for higher education. This is our whole list of our top 20 risks, actually. In our earlier presentations today, and actually at our last session too, at the last meeting, a lot of the presentations focus on some of these higher risks. When I have shared this list with groups, I think one thing I keep asking people is there a surprise there? Is there something there that you're surprised about? Is there something not there that you're surprised about? And so part of the work is to get to a place where the leadership is not surprised by this list, right? We developed this by meeting with every single unit, administrative unit that had on the previous risk register, had items on the previous risk register, updating those, taking this to the risk management executive committee, taking this to system leadership, fine tuning this based on that feedback, and this is what we have. And that will be a continual process for the system now that we sort of have this in place. How often we do that is something that we're still discussing, whether it's annual or whether for the top risk, it's a biannual process. Because I can say that now I look at these top risks that are here, and there are some things that even now as a system, we've realized that probably they have shifted a little bit. Certainly the presentation earlier this morning on compensation is just right on point. It is a risk for us. It's a risk for a lot of institutions right now. And then coordinating our enterprise risks across our strategic plan. And this is something that Chris and I want to really continue to build out. But we have the ability, luckily within our software, to sort of look at these on an overlay. This is just one example of that overlay, but it shows you, it answers the question, which of our strategic plan goals has the highest degree of enterprise risks. There's other questions that we can ask. Another question that we might ask is, which of our enterprise risks is present in which enterprise risk is present in almost every single goal? And that's a different question, and that's actually a different answer. When we looked at that answer is actually diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it raises it relates to almost everything that we do and have in our goals. And then finally, I want to say thanks to Todd Butler, who asked, he's like, well, how do you show the interrelationship of these risks? And so I'm like, well, it's in my head. So this is my attempt to get what's in my head out to show. And so this is just a few of us have reviewed this. You could draw other lines. What's I think important about this sort of picture is that it shows that these are not siloed. And that there are some enterprise risks that are super interrelated. And that if you focus your attention on one, you're actually going to be focusing your attention on a lot of them. And so that may help you identify where you want to focus your attention. Obviously, right now, and for us, we're talking about all over the system enrollment. And again, not a surprise, but sort of helpful to see that it links to almost everything. And that's the run through the slides, but I obviously am very happy to answer questions and talk about this stuff. I could talk about it for a long time, but I don't think you want to. Yes.
What were the risks identified? What was the process that you went through to get, the risks both identified and then categorized appropriately?
Right. So, so we had, previous to my arrival in this position, the institution had gone through a process of creating a risk register. It was about 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years old when I got it. But you could still see that a lot of those risks were at issue. So we identified the key unit for each one of those risks and went and had individual meetings with each of those units to walk through all of the risks for their unit that were identified there and to say, okay, now what is missing on there? And from there, we developed the big list, the 122 list, and put that in. And then went through the scoring process, which again, each unit did the initial scoring, and then we took the scoring to for the Risk Management Executive Committee to score, and also to the Leadership Council to identify scoring. So it was a process of working first with the units, and then at a broader level, sort of trying to right size all of the risks as across the whole survey. If that answers the question.
Yeah, it does.
I think there's more I would have liked to have done, actually. I mean, I think in scoring, I'd be interested in getting broader input on that scoring, but we had to start somewhere. And so there's all kinds of things to do with the future.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Did you see a lot of change between the original risk list that you had inherited that was about 5 years old and what came out here?
Yeah.
And what were some of the things that were?
Enrollment wasn't on there.
Okay. Well, yeah, probably.
Deferred maintenance was at the top. In that process, it kind of moved down, and at the end of the process, it was back on top. I think the political climate and social change wasn't on there. And tuition dependency probably was not on that. It was in that initial risk set, but not in sort of using that phrasing, right? It was more of a financial risk identified, whereas looking at what is it that's creating that financial risk?
So COVID has had its impact on the list.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, COVID and the national climate for sure has had its impact on the list.
So I'm really delighted to see this, first of all. And it certainly represents a huge amount of work. You've given us all these slides, but what goes underneath of it all is huge. What do you look at as sort of the next steps in refining this, implementing, I know you've got people assigned to the various risks and, what are our next steps?
For me, the next step is actually operationalizing enterprise risk management. Being at the table to make sure that as decisions are being made, we think about that and we think about the risks associated with those decisions. We look at as a system what are the mitigation measures that have the most bang for the buck and how that relates to our strategic goals. Not that our decisions are driven by our risks, but that we take our risks into account as we are making institutional decisions, and that we do that in alignment with our strategic plan. And so that's one thing. And I think that's actually a challenging thing to do, to keep this relevant, to keep it updated. Part of that goes to one of these risks, staffing, right? Having the staff to actually do all of that, because there's a lot of inputs that go into this information. And so managing to keep the staff we have, retain them, to do that. And then the other thing is, I would ideally, if we can get that to where it is operational, where people actually see this as a useful and helpful tool, where our leaders see that as a useful and helpful tool, to provide this tool not just at the system level, but at the campus level as well. That's what I would really like to see. Because each campus is unique. Now, I think we could also say that most of these risks are felt on most of our campuses, but that's where I would like it to be.
So this has been mostly done at the system
Yes.
level to date, but you haven't done it for each campus?
No.
Okay.
Nope. It would be great to do for each campus. But first I want to make sure that it's usable, right? I mean, because you could create something like this and it could be very static, and it could be something that is not, that we create but don't operationalize. And so I want to work and focus on and doing that at the system level rather than expand out first.
Thank you.
If I could, I would say that one of our things that we're working towards is taking all of these different things, and there are all these loose strands, and tying them together into an integrated planning process where risk management is taken into account, our strategic goals are taken into account, and we do this on a regular annualized basis so that we put ourselves in a planning culture, taking into account a lot of dynamic factors. And so I think in the past, sometimes when things were done, they were sort of, these columns that never kind of intertwined together. Our opportunity and challenge is to make sure that we do that in a really reasoned way.
Yeah. And things will shift again. So we can.
Yeah,
we
it's
can all hope
dynamic, right?
That before too much longer enrollment won't be as high as it is now, but yeah.
If this list looks exactly the same 3 years from now, I don't think we're doing our job.
Yeah.
It should be
Right.
changing, and stuff drops and other stuff's going to go up, and there'll be new things that are added.
But you need to be cognizant of them or you're liable to
Right.
trip over them.
Right.
Cheryl, I think this is fabulous. And Kirk, I really like this idea that we're going to start, as you said, the strands that were all over the place before, and sometimes made it hard to tell where
Right.
anything was at.
Yeah.
Or what's the policy? There's 5 different places we talk about this. This is fabulous.
Thank you.
It's really needed. It makes it a lot easier to be a member of this community when you can feel more confident about what you're looking at and which directions we're going and where we need to fix and where we need to be careful. Great work. Thank you. And
Thanks. It's
Kirk,
a lot
thank
of
you. This
stuff
is
that
good.
we all feel internally that actually now is getting on
Well, and
paper.
it's nice to see more of it centralized in a sense that now we're all pulling in the same direction. We're looking at things in the same way. We're cognizant of what this other group that's invested in this idea is also doing. I think these are great strides for us.
Thanks. Other questions? Maybe in the room, and then I'll ask our fellow regents that are on the Zoom. But any other questions in the room?
I really like this, and I think it's great to have good visual tools, but also this whole enterprise risk management is near and dear to my heart, and also the compliance work you're doing is great. I was curious about digging a level deeper and encouraging us to dig a little deeper on what are the real risks. So when I see things like enrollment trends, I think what we're really talking about is, are people choosing not to go to college or not to go to our sort of college for some reason? Or are there, demographic trends that are leading to fewer people of the right age, which, I think is less the case. And I think of cost structures, which is more about this tuition dependency. Tuition keeps going, sort of steadily up. And people are questioning the value of that relative to what wages are doing, so I want to dig a level deeper because it's still a little abstract here, what we're really worried about. And I think if we were running a business here, we'd be like, there are competitors out there that are providing something that people view as a substitute for what we're providing at a lesser cost. And we need to dig into that and figure out if that is true and market against it if it is not. So I just want us to make people go a level deeper as opposed to kind of abstracting that a little bit. So I think when you do your work of asking people about the risks, make them dig in a little bit deeper as opposed to on some of these things that are really threatening and near and dear to our identity as an institution. Because I do think it is a really difficult time for higher ed, and we need to sharpen our thinking around who we are and what the real risks are to our existence, which will just make us stronger and better. And then the other comment that I had was what I love about doing enterprise risk management is that it tends to, if you flip it on its head, it tends to be enterprise opportunity management. And so, everything that is a high risk is where we should be focusing our strategy. So when you look at, that list of red items, that's where I want to put our resource.
Yeah.
And so I hope we are also thinking about it that way. And so when you're doing that work to really tease out what are the things that are, really anxiety causing for the institution, we think about focusing on those things and making sure those are what we've got, as our highest sort of resource centers going forward as well. And I think that's got to feed into the strategic plan. And I'm not totally sure we're aligned there now.
Yeah, we're not. Because we're both just building out. And when we definitely, and it's not just Chris and I, but it's just that there's lots of us who recognize that and recognize that we really want to ideally, right, we have a cycle, we go through that planning cycle, that development of building out the understanding of these risks, especially the high risks, and that cycle overlaps our budgeting cycle so that it can feed into the, so that it's all integrated. That's where I hope to get.
Thank you. I just had a question, and I should know the answer to this since you've met with me and my team about some of these, but I thought of this. I've been working with Ellen Taylor and her team on looking at student success efforts specifically for the Pullman campus and assessing not so much risks, but opportunities in terms of what are high priorities. And then we have a column next to it, which is how easy is it to address whatever the challenge is, right? So you might have something that's red, like it's a super high priority, but it's a green because it's actually an easy thing to address. Or you might have the reverse, right? You might have something that's sort of yellow, but it would take a mountain in order to fix that, several years and millions of dollars. And I'm wondering, that's part of this, right? Because you might have something that's high risk that we need to manage it, but it's not that it needs 15 more FTE.
Right.
It's just that it needs a little bit more eyes and maybe a bit clearer policy, right? It could be a high risk, but an easy to bring that level down and to manage it. So I wonder if you have done that. I should know the answer to this. Have you done a kind of second level scoring, which is what would it take to bring that red down to a yellow or green?
No. My plan after this actually is to go out to the risk owners, which is the terminology in the software, but the lead person for each of these risks, and to build out exactly what you're talking about, Regent Redmond, build out the picture of that risk, the understanding of the risk, the gap analysis. What are we doing to mitigate? What could we be doing to mitigate? And then what, how available are those various mitigation strategies? And actually to build that in, so we have a record of it in one place, to build it in to the software package, because it plans to do that. We can't do that for 122. I mean, otherwise that's all we're going to be doing. But we can and should be doing it for our top risk, because then we will use that as the tool to help with the additional sort of strategic planning for the whole system.
So Regent Cerna, and then John, I think you might have a comment or question. You came on the screen. So Enrique.
Have you looked at the potential, what could be the risk or the impact if the Supreme Court rules to throw out affirmative action?
No.
Should you?
I think that, I mean, to me, that is an individual decision. Where I do see that already here, though, in our risk is the political climate and attendant social change, because to me that speaks of social change that is happening. So it will feed into that risk analysis. And at a really large scale level, that decision may have less impact for us on a day-to-day basis, but it will certainly impact the ways in which we build out operations.
So, but will you be looking at that thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, because it's going to impact higher education in the same way the initial decisions that they're looking to review impacted higher education. So the thing about, I mean, there's, new risks show up at least weekly. And that's the thing, right? This is trying to build an enterprise risk management system and model that is close to real time.
Yeah.
That we can still make a useful tool.
I was thinking about that a lot on election day.
Yeah.
What risk would come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Regent Shetler, do you have any
Yeah,
questions, comments?
Just more of a comment. I like the line of thinking that Heather had, because I see that this has an opportunity for just an incredible data set and lots of information. So then you have to just ask yourself, so now what? What do we do with that information, and how do we really turn it into something that is truly meaningful and productive for the university? So you got a lot of work ahead of you. It's a lofty job, but thank you for what you've been doing. Seriously, it's super important.
Thanks. And I agree. It building it out takes time. Operationalizing it takes real commitment. And it's got to be commitment across the institution. I mean, I can't do it on my own. I am good at bugging people, but it
I have a question and a comment. So my question is relative to a comment that you made. This is system-wide, which I think is where we start, and it's so impressive. I suspect that each of the chancellors may have their own risk assessment, whether it's as formal as this or just in their pocket. These are the things that keep me up at night. I'm curious how that dialogue or interaction between kind of the campus level risk and the system risk, what are you envisioning that integration and discussion looks like? Or has that already occurred? And I thought that I heard that maybe it hadn't. Okay.
No, it has not. I actually on the operational risk side, I've certain chancellors I've worked with a whole lot based on whatever's happening at their campus. with respect to this, I want to get to a better operational stage at the system level and then move out to the campuses. And so I hope to start that dialogue and at least to, start thinking about it in the next, in kind of like second quarter of next year is tentatively where it's in my head to think about that.
And then the comment that I would make is kind of relative to what Regent Redmond just kind of said a few minutes ago in terms of aligning. I had written a note, risk, strategy, budget, how all of those kind of thread together. And then Kirk made the comment about needing to bring it together. I was looking at our legislative priorities, and there are several legislative priorities that do align with these top risks. So just even to thread our meeting so far, I'm seeing some of what we're saying are the priorities, and we're asking for support at the legislature are the areas of greatest risk, whether that be, some of the enrollment, the deferred maintenance, certainly the compensation. So, I mean, there are a few here that we've already identified and are working actively to try and to mitigate. So that just feels like a great, to Heather's point, enterprise opportunity management moment. So
Yeah, if they didn't overlap, it would be concerning.
right.
But it's good to see, and I think that will only just get more purposeful as we move forward.
Right. We have about 5 more minutes in kind of this area. Are there any other comments or questions? And Regent Blankenship, I don't see you on screen, but I think you are still on. Did you have any comments or questions?
I didn't have any questions, Madam Chair, but I'm tracking.
I didn't want to call you out, but I also didn't want you to not have an opportunity to speak up. Okay. All right. Well then, appreciate your update, and I think you will be providing updates on a regular basis.
Yes.
Which I think will be great. So this is a heavy lift, and it was worth the wait to have you have enough time and space with the board. So thank you for
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
kindness.
I was happy to not rush through it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
We are going to move to the fiscal year 2023 integrated financial forecast. Vice President for Finance and Administration and CFO Stacy Pearson. It's headed up. This might be your last Finance and Administration Committee.
Yes. What?
The board.
And hence you need an update.
We need an update before you are to retire.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that great discussion. I think Charles done a really great job. She started, this is our inaugural function that Laura reminded me very early on in my tenure at WSU that we needed. And she started in April of 2020 and was really, really busy that first year. So it's good to get to this point. Okay. Well, it is timely to do an update on our financial forecast, not just because it's my last meeting, because it's just a good time to do that and to give all of this is interrelated. What we've just talked about in compliance, what you've heard about in strategic planning, and then our system transition and our budget model. It is all interrelated, and it's a really good time for all of this to come together, especially as we think about our future, which will look different than our past. And we have some short-term challenges, and this is a good time to really be working on some of those. So I did submit a write-up in the agenda, and then you have a copy of my slides. I wanted to review a little bit. There have been a lot of budgetary impacts, and this really actually goes back to when I started at WSU, because we initiated a fiscal recovery. And I think the only two regents that when I started was Laura Powell and Brent, and everybody else is new. But I think you've heard some of this over the time frame is we had a fiscal recovery period. We set a goal for 3 years to wipe out a $30 million deficit and ended with a $30 million surplus, which was so exciting. It just happened to be right at the end of fiscal year 20. We were 3 months into the pandemic. And so we literally went from completing that recovery to dealing with the impacts of the pandemic. And many of you commented at the time, thank goodness we did this because we were able to recover some of our reserves. So when in fiscal year 21, we had campus closure, all of our, literally every revenue stream was impacted during that time. And we also received federal and state COVID funding. And so we were able to manage through that. It was very tricky. It was challenging because things didn't happen in the right order, but we were able to get through those periods and then, kind of reconcile what had happened in those last years and start stabilizing our budget. Then when we returned to the campus post-pandemic, we were experiencing enrollment declines and revenue losses, even though our state appropriations were stable. And then in the current year, we continued to have enrollment declines and revenue declines, and we're managing these currently through budget reductions and some use of reserves. And we're in the midst of building a new budget model to help us deal with future challenges. This gives you a sense of our enrollment impact. So head count is the gray and FTE is the red. And so since fiscal year 2020, or academic year, our enrollment has dropped about 4,000 students cumulatively and 13.4%. So obviously that's a significant fiscal impact. And here's the gross and net tuition impacts.
So Stacy, go back one slide. So you're showing FTE. So
FTE is the red.
Yeah. So this is our employment as well as our.
No, I'm sorry. This is just student enrollment.
Okay. So what's the gray versus the red?
The gray is a head count. So number of students. FTE is the average that they take for classes. I believe it's 12 credits.
Okay.
So it's it's
part-time versus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And we measure both because it impacts, we kind of look at what the makeup is of the students and how they're enrolling and different trends. I mean, I'll give an example. We just noted that for fall, we saw a slight increase in freshmen. Was it FTE? So we kind of look at all of those trends down at the lower levels to see what the impacts of those will be over time. So I'm just showing you a measurement that we get
no, that's fine.
in a pretty standard basis.
The FTE thing, means different things.
Yeah, FTE, because we also have employee FTE too.
FTE.
So full-time equivalent, yeah.
Okay.
And this is the impact, shows the trend of the impact on our revenues. So gray is the gross tuition and then net tuition is the red. So if you look there at the net tuition and we're slightly above where we were in 2018. So we had a large growth and then coming down, pandemic related and maybe perhaps other factors.
And those are in just dollars, not adjusted for inflation or anything, just
No,
actual
just
dollars. Yeah.
Just our revenue dollars, yeah. And the difference in net tuition is you've heard us talk about waivers, how we use those. And that's an area that we're looking at managing better at WSU, but just tracking that because we were seeing a trend where our enrollments prior to the pandemic were increasing, but our net tuition was decreasing. So looking at what is causing that to happen is something that we've been looking at. And then Chris alluded to this in his presentation, Chris Mulick, about what we did in fiscal year 23 with the state appropriations and compensation. And we received funding for our classified employees for 3.25% increase, and then worked pretty hard to identify additional increase for our faculty, staff, and graduate students. And we're able to provide 2.5%. and we moved the effective date to September 1st. And in that, about 1.7% of that increase was funded from state appropriations, and the rest we took for budget reductions. Chris mentioned the state funding split and how we're trying to appeal to the legislature to improve that. But since we did have tuition revenue declines and the legislature does expect us to pay for some of that salary increase from our tuition revenues, that is why we did it via a budget reduction.
Stacey, just a point of clarification for me. So when the governor negotiates with unions for pay increases, are they across the board? That's basically extends to us. Is that what I sort of get from your?
Depending on the
mandatory
union, it extends to us.
So there, okay.
Yes.
But there are some unions that we negotiate with separately then, or?
So maybe like the,
Oh, I was just gonna say at WSU, we negotiate individually with our labor unions. And then there's other higher eds that have formed a correlation that go together with the state.
Okay.
On the higher ed side of the house. And then there's general government. also.
Okay, so it doesn't all come top down.
But we're not, if the state negotiates with all those unions, a particular salary increase, we're just not going to get more than that. It's not, that's what Chris's point was. So
I was
it's,
just wondering how much is an unfunded mandate?
well, we have lots of those, but
Yeah, I know. Okay, thank you.
so for the current fiscal year that we are in, we reduced our budgets by 5% in response to the enrollment declines, as well as to cover the salary increases. So we had projected net tuition revenue losses at 15 million for the year due to those declines. So it's something that we have to take very seriously and manage. And so for future planning, we're looking at how do we stabilize at our current enrollment levels. And there was mention of future demographics. The quote enrollment cliff of fiscal year 25 is that there's lower birth rates there and fewer 18-year-olds graduating from high school than there were in the past. Not so sure that is as true for the state of Washington, but somebody mentioned the competition factor is that a lot of other institutions are competing with us for our own students. So in a sense, you might look at it as you know, the pandemic did cause that to happen a little bit sooner than we were planning for when it comes to adjusting our budgets for lower enrollments. The other things we're talking about in relation to our system is that chancellors and VPs will manage their spending within their budget, including managing position vacancies. We're in a time period where even though we're reducing our budgets, we're also having a hard time filling our positions. And so you wouldn't see us coming forward with things like a hiring freeze because we're struggling with those positions. But since many of them are vacant, then that's an opportunity to look at those vacancies and say, you know, do we need to fill this position? Do we need to fill it in the same way? Is there another opportunity? So we're asking all chancellors and VPs and leaders to look at that. And then prudent utilization of our area reserves within improved limits. And what I mean by that is take a look at reserves to help you get through a difficult time, but we need to make sure that we don't spend those down too quickly. We're also beginning planning. We'll be announcing in the next month additional reductions for fiscal year 24, as well as continuing with our new budget model. And the reason that is, I'll go to that in a minute, but we have two very large graduating classes coming up. And so even if we have stabilized enrollments going into next year, we are projecting another decline. So we need to plan ahead for that. And then again, just considering what might our enrollment look over the next 3 or 4 years as we do look at programs, strategic initiatives to help increase our enrollments and then implement the budget model. So assume when we've run projections, assuming our incoming class is about the same as it was this last fall. We expect between a 4% and 6% drop and flattening of overall enrollment after that as those two large classes graduate. So it does look like it will flatten out in the future. But again, those assumptions are having the same level of the fall classes that we had this fall over the next couple of years. And then the tuition impact would also level out in those future years. But meanwhile, we'll plan for a budget reduction and adjustment for fiscal year 24. This assumption here does show the impact of a 2.5% tuition increase, because that does help the flattening out of the revenues going forward. And since we have had previous discussions about those tuition rates and keeping them at a fairly steady level. So if those change, then we might see a different impact on those enrollments. But we're really trying to figure out is what gets us back to that equilibrium and what actions do we need to take in the meantime.
Stacy, can you go back one slide? So when Stacy showed this to our team, one of the things that I appreciate is that this was a very conservative, appropriately conservative suggestion that was sort of just a maintenance level in terms of recruitment. Elizabeth and I have been, mostly Elizabeth, talking to Saichi, and I just sort of said, well, this kind of assumes that we're just at one place. What are our targets? What is it that we actually want to see our enrollment be, as opposed to are we just going to let it ride and sort of see where it turns out? So I think it's later January, we expect to have some pretty good projections that will constitute a goal, if you will, on where we would like to see our fall enrollment. And then we will have a chance to sort of compare and look and see. So we can share with the board a bit about here's what we think by campus each of our different locations will be in terms of first year students and transfers. That's based on some data. It's not just pure speculation or picking a number, but also is a little bit of an aspirational target for us, so that this hopefully represents the bottom line and we can actually curve it sooner or change that a bit depending on what we're able to do with the incoming classes. I don't think it radically changes, but I think it's important that we pick some numbers and then we can do our budgeting and some of those stuff with some bands there based on what our enrollment actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want
I
to
mean,
add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Saichi, I think, spoke to all of you at the Board of Regents last spring and maybe even the spring before about wanting to set enrollment targets for each campus. Not something we've historically done, makes it even more urgent now. So he can create, based on mathematical modeling and past data where he thinks we're going to get, then we can say, well, is that where we want to get, or do we want to be above that? I mean, he might say to me, we could have 5,000 students come to Pullman, and I might say, no, I don't, we should have such problems, but we want to make sure that we can accommodate the students that we take in as well. So he'll be working with each of the chancellors on that, bringing us at least the projections. There's some really good early signs. You may have already shared that with the Regents, but some really good early signs. We just moved to the Common App, which is an online application portal that allows students to apply to virtually as many schools that are in that app as they want to. And we're seeing a huge uptick in the numbers of applications even so far. And, applications typically don't come in fully until end of January. That's why Kirk said end of January is a good benchmark, because then we can track that against past years.
So the bottom line is we will keep the board informed and you all will see what those are before September of next year. So
I hate to say it, but can you go back to that?
Oh, I can. Sorry, I'll stay there.
Darn slide. It looks like the bunny slope where I try to learn how to why would we not get back to 29,000 or whatever that number is back in 18?
I think it would be a good goal. I'm more of saying, how do you get through the next 3 years while we ramp up?
Yeah, I guess I'm not criticizing your forecast, but I'm just curious, like, what are we thinking has changed?
So I
Or
think,
what's going on with the rest of the institutions in the state?
no, there's two things. One is fall of 23, but the other is the longer term thing. And this needs to be part of our strategic planning exercise for different campuses is what enrollments are they seeking? Maybe we're smaller and we say, okay, we like being smaller and we want to be more selective. I'm just making something up, but we need to make those choices that it's not just year to year, but long term, because that affects finances. What do we need with buildings and infrastructure and those kind of things? So this to me will be part of what we want to do in the strategic planning part is what is our desired enrollment? Do we want to be back at that same number or not? So again, this is one of those other strings, if you will, that we're trying to tie into all the planning efforts is this has also got to be something that 5 years, where do we need to be? If you get back to 30,000, a legitimate question is, do we have the faculty and staff to support that kind of a number? If the answer is no, then you better have a plan how we're going to get there. So yes. So Heather, it's a good one. We're just not there yet. And we're all pressing a little bit to say we want to see some goals out there, what that needs to be.
Okay, so we're not yet sure where we want
Correct.
to be.
Correct.
Especially
would-
by campus, just to put to the end of that sentence, if we wanted to go back to, say, 30,000 total system enrollment.
Yeah, I know that was
Question
snug.
The question I would put out there is, does that mean, equally across all campuses? Or do we want to, for example, triple globals enrollment, stay level in
Yes.
Pullman and grow, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
sort of like, let's think as each campus, where are their goals and how does it support the system? I'm sorry, Judy.
No, I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges with turning this enrollment around is the pipeline into the first year is pretty good. But most of our enrollment in our second, third, and fourth year are coming from within the institution. So that's a hard thing to turn around quickly, particularly when we see our transfer institution numbers are way down. So the students that we might have got coming into, let's say, second through fourth year, we know that pipeline is pretty narrow compared to what we'd like it to be. And that makes it hard if you're only increasing your population in 1 year. In a 4-year program, it's hard to turn it around.
Yeah, sure. I mean, right away. I'm not suggesting that we,
but it
suddenly take a sharp uptick. I'm just wondering where we're trying to get. I guess
Yes,
my
no,
question
that's a
is, where
great-
are we trying to go?
Yeah.
Because that I just assumed we were trying to go back to where we were at least and keep going up, because I thought that was what. But I obviously.
No, it's a great question. I just think the answer is we haven't made that decision. And I think you want to make that a decision, not let it drift and sort of say, well, of course we want to be that. I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the right size for each campus? And when you're smaller, decide how much bigger you want to be. And I think it's a good time for us to really be evaluating some of that. So.
Regent Blankenship.
Madam Chair, I'm tracking some of the questions, and it made me think of what I wanted to ask, and perhaps it'd be good dinner conversation sometime. But part of this strategic thinking, not to bring up something that's a little dated perhaps now, but I liked the energy we had at one time pre-COVID on the aspirational thought of drive to 25.
Right.
And something like that in the background, helping to spearhead the drive for enrollment is good strategic thinking, whether we resurrected that or something like that, or even made it campus specific, as Elizabeth alluded to. I think that needs to be part of our thinking as well, to position us as a premier research institution to help answer some of the angst, perhaps at the faculty level, of what are we going to do about enrollment? Are we really responding? And that is kind of a marketing aspirational thought, something like that added to the other things you've been discussing. I think it's a good target. And if there's any thought on that in the future, I'd love to be a part of it. That's all.
So one other thing, talk more broadly as a Regents about this, but one of our proposals is that we really use the June retreat to spend a lot of it on 3 different campuses per year, really having some dive-in time for the Regents around strategy and their strategic plan. And the idea then is some of these kind of things you would expect to say, okay, we're going to look at, these 3 schools in even years, these 3 in odd, with some dive down would be, what are enrollment goals? What's an overall institutional type of thing? It's meant to be a strategic time, not just a hour-long PowerPoint time. But that's one of the things that we want to do, because these are very good long-term strategic questions that the board needs to be involved with, the goal setting, not just us saying, here's what it's going to be. So some of this, I hope we're going to plan on diving into a little bit more than we can at one of these meetings this summer, where we're rolling up our sleeves and be able to really spend some time on 3 different campuses and keep rotating and using that time that way for a strategic long-term conversation. So
to do that, it would be good also to have data on for those campuses, to have data on what's happening in those regions
Yes.
of the state in terms of growth, industry, that kind of thing. And also, I think it would be good to understand what's going on with enrollment and expertise, areas of concentration with the other higher ed institutions that we are competing with.
Right.
In the state. I know UW-Tacoma has been growing a lot, interested in what's going on there, what they've been adding, interested in kind of enrollment trends at the other higher ed institutions as well. So just some good background data that we could all do as reading in advance.
Yep.
So that we come a little more prepared.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, and a good example of that is I fully expect as community college enrollments recover, we'll see that transfer number change. So there's going to be things that happen outside of WSU in addition that we should be tracking to see if we can project what those impacts will be.
I think a couple of comments real quick. Brett, I was thinking about that as well, because the Drive to 25 was almost an internal campaign. I mean, it was something that you could rally around. And so it feels like some of these items on the risk register that are strategic have the opportunity to create some of that messaging. What I appreciate about this conversation is, Stacy, what you're doing is you're showing us the conservative financial model for what the trend looks like. And we're talking about the strategy and the target that we want to achieve. And then when we'll have the time and space to be able to help support the university leadership to achieve the target. But this purpose is to ensure that we are doing our due diligence in the way in which we should. So I really appreciate how this has been put together and prepared, because it's the way in which we need to continue to think about all of those contingencies that may happen and what we need to plan towards. We have about 10-15 more minutes. And so I want to make sure that Stacy has enough time to really kind of keep us moving towards where we're headed. So keep going, and we have a little flexibility because
I'd like to give you a little bit of good news. And that is in our fiscal recovery and with the federal relief funds, we did manage, we being central as well as the areas, to build our reserves up. And I think that they'll be very helpful. We've set our budget for this year, And we've also allowed the use of some carry forward. Carry forward and reserves are one and the same. So we've allowed areas to use some of their carry forward to help deal with their current year budget. And then I think that this can help us with the next fiscal year where we're already projecting that our revenues will be down. Everybody knows these are one-time funds and we don't want them to go too low again. But we can also use those to kind of help not just focus on what we need to accomplish for the next year or two, but prepare us for implementation of our new budget model. So I feel like it does give a bit of a cushion for this year and next year as we set those strategies and put some of those things into place to be able to move ahead for the future years. So Kirk and Elizabeth and others always hear me say, hey, this is good news, but don't let it go too low because, you know, we don't want to get back into that situation that we were before, but this will help us, I think, bridge over that period.
Stacy, so we have used all of our funds that we got, COVID related funds.
That's
We
the
have
next
not.
slide.
Oh, that's,
It's literally the next slide.
Yeah.
oh,
Let me-
I was.
Yeah,
looking ahead.
I'll tell you about that because,
Yeah, because, I mean, mainly because there's been a lot of
yeah.
talk about the fact that people are hoarding it and it hasn't been used for the purposes it was supposed to be used for.
But just
Looks
to
like- it looks
remind
like you
you,
did.
so there's a lot of acronyms on the top of this, like HERF and CARES and CURSA and ARP. Those are all the federal COVID programs for higher education and what Washington State brought in.
Just before we leave the last slide, I'm sorry, I'm going to do a Lisa shower. We got to look, this is really a remarkable achievement. And I want to be careful. That's almost an additional $100 million in reserves. This is not just Stacy, it's faculty, it's staff, department heads, deans, chancellors. I mean, this is fiscal responsibility, making sure that we're not spending every dollar that comes in just because we can. And that's actually, you know, put us in a different spot. We've got to be careful, but it's taken us years to build back up to this level, considering where it was in the last decade. So it's easy to go by and say it's a nice craft. Let's move on to the next one. But this is, I just want people to be proud of the work that a lot of people have done to get us here.
Well, and through the pandemic, okay? I mean, there was a need to spend, but we said, hey, we don't know what's happening next. I mean, put us back a year and a half, we really did not know what to expect. So everybody was like, just don't do anything. You know, we've got to be really careful going forward. And now we know that, well, we've got a better sense of the landscape and it would require prudency, but also strategic investment. What is it that we should be doing next?
I know,
Sorry to call you out.
No, I was looking at my notes and I was like, wow, wait a minute. And then the next question happened, but I was like, wait, I think this is more than what we were even talking about.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, and what I want to say about COVID funding is we certainly used it to cover the expenses during COVID, but remember, what we received funding for was lost revenue. We had 100 million in lost revenue, so we were not completely reimbursed. I had lots of requests. We asked everybody to give their requests for, well, what revenue did you lose during COVID? But we actually didn't go out and distribute it. We said, okay, everybody, hang on, do the best you can. And so we do have not all of that remaining 53 million, but that is to reimburse lost revenue. And it wasn't, we didn't get all of it back and we didn't distribute it all out to areas. So it is a source of funds that we have to help us through these next couple of years. There's a lot of need for that money. But again, I think if we can use it strategically and help us get back on our feet or get our enrollments up, then it will be very prudent. So having that, I think, is the piece of good news going into this, because it, like I said, it gives kind of a cushion for moving forward.
I guess my only point on that is that I've heard an increasing focus on funds not being spent, just so that somebody doesn't come across and say, well, you haven't spent it, COVID's over, we're going to scarf it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's would be my only concern.
No, and remember in order to get the funds, you had to prove the lost revenues. So that's there. Now, then how you spend that, we could have gone out and reimbursed all sorts of things over that time period. But what we did is we reduced budgets to deal with the revenue losses so that we could kind of figure out what is the next thing that we're going to have to do. And I think that the need for those funds are going to be over the next couple of years for sure. The other update, because we did approve you approved the athletics fiscal recovery, just to give you a status on those 6 steps that were approved, that a lot of progress has been made in order to, first we address getting through the revenue losses due to COVID-19 and did the borrowing and to balance the budget and balance those losses. We didn't do that with the COVID federal funds. We did it with going through this program here. And then balancing the annual athletics budget, which you've seen over the last couple of years. Also talked about restoring the university commitment to pay the Pac-12 due starting in fiscal year 23, which we at this point in time don't need to fully do because they have enough revenue to cover some of that. The yellow on number 4 is to reset the athletics budget model and develop a sustainable funding model by investing new realized revenues in future growth. What that is really saying is to say, we're not going to spend the money until we have it on future projects. And then number 5, assess debt refunding and restructuring opportunities for additional savings. You know, with today's market, that's kind of over, but we did refund some of their debt for an $11 million savings, which they have been able to set aside and use in the last 2 fiscal years. And then the last step is formalize a plan to repay the cumulative deficit starting after FY22 going forward. So I just wanted to give you an update as to where we're on that. And then this last slide just gives you an overview of our debt, and that it is, we probably, you know, we did some borrowing and refunding in the previous years, but it's on this graph will show a decline over time and will be something that we can use strategically in the future. Not a very good borrowing market right now, but you know, hopefully that'll change over time. So that is the end of that presentation. And then in the write-up, one of the things I do refer to in some of the things to consider is in our strategic plan, you know, we saw in our risk management how enrollments came up again. And then in our strategic plan, we can identify some of those strategies that can help with enrollments and then tie that to our new budget model. So I think those are some pretty exciting things to be able to work on in the future. So questions?
Brett, did you have a question? And then I know Heather does as well. Or a comment?
I didn't have a question. As one of the people on the board when you came on, it was really a privilege to watch Kirk build out his cabinet. And you were one of the linchpins to make a turnaround on campus. I just wanted to express the board's thanks for a job well done. And I hope it feels good to look behind you and see a secure institution in spite of our trips through some significant whitewater along the way. So thank you.
It's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stacy has been my security blanket throughout this board journey, and I'm definitely gonna miss her because she's always made me feel like we got this in hand, and I'm a worst case scenario planner as I have a kindred soul here. So you're going to be very hard to replace, but we will do our best.
Sure.
And you kept us out of Bitcoin, which I think good job on that.
I am so boring when it comes to things like that.
That was really good. That was
You're
really
right.
good.
Wow.
So in the transition from you to somebody who, will have big shoes to fill, there were a couple things in your write-up that I wanted to figure out how we cover during this transition, because I think they're really good. And I think, and I was excited by them, but they seem like they're so Stacy that, but they're sort of this interstitial thing that is going to be hard for someone who's fitting into the role to really do. So the two bullets were the consider partnerships with other educational institutions and local industries to streamline administrative spending and expand access to academic programs for working adults, blah, blah, blah. And that the last part, I think probably somebody else can do. But who's going to work on the consider partnerships with other educational institutions and local industries to streamline administrative spending? Because I thought that was a brilliant piece.
I think some of that's already going on, from some of my colleagues that I've talked to. And actually this comes, some of these points come from me working with my other Pac-12 CFOs and others. We said, what are people working on? What are you doing to address some of these challenges? And so I kept that pretty general, but I just know working with the chancellors, there's already been discussions about how some of these partnerships can work. I don't know how much discussion is going on with community colleges, but that is another area of partnership that many institutions have looked at with their local community colleges because of how much they're struggling also.
I think it'd be great. I mean, Kirk, I don't know if you've got somebody that could run with that, but if there is somebody who's on Stacy's team or somewhere in the organization who could, at least in this interim period, take that on and really try to drive some efficiencies there, I think that would be amazing. And then the other one that I thought was great, which you won't be surprised by, was encourage review of academic and administrative activities and practices that can be discontinued to reduce costs and workload on faculty and staff. And I don't know if there's a list going somewhere, but the trust that you have with the whole institution, and the new person is going to have to build that again. But is there somebody who can touch with a magic wand, who has some of that trust that can keep that going?
Yeah, and I do.
As you leave, I mean, I think that would be really valuable, because there is going to be a lot of need for that as we head into this, at least what's a trough here for a while, and maybe is the new normal because we want to be smaller. I don't know.
Yeah, and my staff, we talk about this a lot, and especially in the context of Workday, because we all know there are a lot of processes that we have to keep going. They're kind of manual in nature, and we implemented Workday. Some of those have been alleviated, but not all of them. And now that we're in that kind of, post-stabilization phase of the actual Workday implementation, now we can start using the tools that we can add to say, okay, if we add this tool, then we don't have to do this anymore. We also need to go back and look at some of our processes and say, did we keep too many approval processes and things that we need to rethink now that we've lived with it for a while, and maybe we can do even better? We like to listen to our customers to say, hey, this is just taking too long. And go back and revisit. I think one of the great things that can come out of projects like modernization is that you create what I call a continuous improvement model, where you have all this expertise from people who went through the implementation, and they're thinking in that way. So how can we reduce steps? Especially now that we're struggling to find a lot of staff, how can we leverage our systems? We've used our consultants to tell us, how can we better leverage these systems that we have and do these processes better, so that, we can just maybe in the future have to rely on adding less staff, but have, better utilization of the systems. And I think that goes on for a while. I think we have real opportunities in our student system too. Yeah. To make, to upgrade those and make a lot of things more easier and user friendly.
We will make sure that as we transition from Stacy to her successor, some of these are not dropped, that, depending on who that person is.
I'm leaving a notebook.
Yes, well, no, I think we have to be very explicit about it and make sure that we don't go 6 months in and the person go, oh, That's something I just wasn't even thinking about. So I made a note. We'll make sure we assign people so those don't get dropped.
Well, it's something Kirk adds to my goals every year, additional administrative efficiency. So, we're thinking that in that direction. I just want to identify specifically what projects can we do now that we have this, what's the next one that can either be low hanging fruit or have the greatest impact.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's sometimes if in your departure, a couple of things that are low hanging fruit and meaty can be pushed to the next level down. So it's
Right.
not like someone needs to think about them
Mhm.
that who's at your level. It's just like they're off and running at the next level down.
Yeah.
Then that gives your successor time to find the next ones, but there's already some that are happening.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you just, that way there's no lost time because the next person's gonna have to win everybody over before they're gonna start saying, and now, whereas you already have all that goodwill. So we want to utilize that. Oh yeah, this was Stacy's legacy. So you know what I mean? We want to get the mileage out of that. We're
Great.
doing it for
Thank
Stacy.
Wonder how long that will last.
Yeah, well, we're gonna milk it for as much as
24
we can.
hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great,
Got
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Well, Stacy, you are up for many of the other agenda items. I do really want to express my appreciation and for not at the last Board of Regents meeting where we had some milestone moments, like the auditor was here during this committee meeting, and you just have really taken on so many significant initiatives all at the same time. And your legacy is one that will be difficult to match and one that is so appreciated. So thank you for your leadership, and we very much appreciate what you have done and your impact. So
Thank you.
That's fun.
Thank you very much. I have great colleagues, great staff, and then working with all of you, it's really been a pleasure. It really has.
I feel like we should take a break, but give a hug and all the things. So we have one more item before I think we were kind of scheduled to take a break. And come on up, Ellen. And I think this is
You
a
can,
good item
but you
to-
don't need to.
Okay.
I'm okay.
I thought you were.
I don't think they'll bite. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here this afternoon. And in the category of strategic initiatives to, at least in part, address enrollment, I'm here today to talk a little bit as an informational item about a sort of vision of a Southside neighborhood revitalization project. Oh, good, it's up there. Okay. This project is a vision of a multi-phase, multi-year, multi-facility effort to refresh the south side of campus from a housing and dining standpoint. And I should specify Pullman campus, of course, our main residential campus. So today I want to give you an overview of the project, especially phase one, and outline the need for some new facilities or refurbished facilities in this part of campus. The South Side neighborhood, which is essentially the south side of the Pullman campus, south of Stadium Way, all along that south edge, is the largest residential part of our community on campus. It's well equipped to support large numbers of residents. We have 7 residence halls and 1 dining facility down there. And actually 60% of the students who live on campus live in that South Side neighborhood. This fall, for example, about 2,300 students are living on the south side. The market and Coog Eats and other venues down there combined process about 4,000 transactions per weekday and about 3,000 per weekend day. Those are the dining and food venues. The south side also houses thousands of students and families during new Coug orientation every summer. So for many, it is one of their first impressions of WSU Pullman. And we house them down there because it is where we have the capacity to house literally thousands of folks coming through. So the halls and the dining facilities on the south side of campus, they are very large and they are very old. The last new construction on this part of campus was completed in 2009. The last update was to the South Side Dining Center, was completed in 2007. And this is in stark contrast to the north side or the hillside of campus, where we've had 2 new residence halls and 1 new rec center in the Chinook building in the past 13 years. In addition, we have removed 2 sky bridges that cross Stadium Way on the south side of campus. Needed to remove those, but it has exacerbated the perception that there's a barrier between students living on the south side of campus and the support and amenities that are in the central part of campus. So Southside feels remote, it feels deprioritized, and it feels like we've de-invested. That's what we hear from our students.
Not, 59 years, I'm not thinking it's too old. I mean,
Oh, Kurt, it's nicely seasoned.
Okay, thank you.
But it ain't as young as it used to be.
We're kind of biased about that.
I was
thing,
gonna
so
say, yeah.
just want.
No comment. I'm going to move on. I have a little video that it's just a very brief video. Actually, some of our students worked on creating this to give you all a sense of sort of the contrast between south side and north side. If I click, it goes. All right.
Wow, fancy.
Say this is north side. South side.
Looking good.
Borderline vintage, right?
This is a serious issue.
That's south. North.
that was a great video.
Wasn't that fun?
Yep.
Like the music, you know.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where do the students live, like in Stevenson complex? Where do they eat? Do
They currently eat at what is called the Rotunda. Yeah, so that's the main that is the dining facility on the south side of campus is the Rotunda. And anyone who lives on that side of campus, that's the one they're most likely to access. So
They can access anyone, they can eat anywhere they want that has a dining hall or?
yeah, they'll have a meal plan that will allow them to move back and forth, but they're always going to eat in the one that's in their neighborhood. Yeah. So we're proposing this project now for several reasons. And I'll just highlight that the first one is really recruitment and retention. You saw some quotes on there. Those are not exaggerated. This summer, especially during New Coug orientation, I've shared with a couple of you all in conversations. We started hearing from parents and from students as they saw the facilities that we even heard from some that said, we're starting to question our decision to come to WSU instead of one of your competitor institutions. We came here because of the better academics. This was in the College of Vet Med, so go Vet Med. But now that we've seen the facilities, we're wondering if we shouldn't have gone to that other school, Colorado State, where they don't have as good academics, but the campus is nicer. So institutions with which we compete, like Colorado State and Montana State, have completed or are nearing completion on new facilities. An additional piece is, and actually, let me give you some data here from Montana State. After we prepared this presentation, we had a conversation. We consulted with our colleagues at Montana State. I just want to give you all a little information from some dining work that they did on their campus. They remodeled a dining facility, and that's really what phase one that I'm talking about today is. It's a dining facility, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They remodeled a dining facility which opened in 2015. They also built a second new dining facility that opened in 2018. Their analysis, as an aside, was that building new was more cost effective in the end for dining facilities because of the tremendous technological changes in dining services that have happened in the last 20 years that sort of refurbishing doesn't always allow you to actually implement what is available technologically speaking from a modern perspective. When they opened their first newly remodeled dining facility, off-campus meal plan purchases, so students who are not living on campus but went ahead and purchased a meal plan, went from $440 to $1,200 per year. Cash sales increased from $200,000 to $600,000 per year. When the second dining facility opened, off-campus meal plans doubled to $2,400 per year, and cash sales hit $1 million. Their residence hall occupancy increased from 3,735 to 4,200 after the first dining facility was opened with no new residence hall construction. So having an appealing and modern dining facility transformed not only the business that they could do in their dining facility, but it transformed their ability to influence students to want to live on campus and live in their residence halls. Another reason that we're proposing this at this point is the south side, north side disparity that you all saw in the video. Students refer to the south side of campus as the poor area of campus, and this doesn't support our goal of an equitable experience and equitable access to higher education. For students on meal plans, there is research that shows that having a convenient and attractive campus is among the most important considerations when choosing a college. In terms of student success, students with meal plans are more likely to know about and use campus resources like career counseling, academic advising, mental health resources, and so on. And some of this is just our ability to engage with them because the spaces are spaces they want to spend time, and also our ability to use communication methods to let them know about resources. We believe an attractive dining space will attract more off-campus students. Montana State certainly saw that. Faculty and staff increasing the overall usage of the space. The dining facilities will play a significant role in successful transition to and integration into the community. So that aids in retention, not only in terms of retention towards graduation, but also retention of people living on campus and spending their money on campus. So pending approvals, our vision is to propose, we are proposing to start construction on a new dining facility, essentially phase one of our larger vision, in the fall of 2023. Completion would be expected to occur in fall of 2025. Future phases will involve new and renovated residence halls with a no net new mindset, meaning no significant change in bed counts. Certainly our enrollment projections don't suggest that we need to change that, but really replacement of older facilities that would be taken offline or remodeled on that south side. But again, right now we're really focusing on the phase one, which is the dining facility, which will have the broadest impact on the largest number of students. That's why we're starting with the dining facility rather than one of the residence halls. The dining facility we envision would include flexible space with private, individual, and group dining spaces, allowing students to meet their needs on any given day in any given situation. It will include area desks, which are essentially centralized locations that would serve all of the residence halls on the south side. This is an area desk is a place where students know they can access in-person staff support, pick up packages. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is that package delivery to students on campus, something like quadrupled, and it has not gone down. And that's actually happening on college campuses nationwide. And if you think about your own home, I know at our house, we got a lot more things delivered during the pandemic, and we kind of still do. But also it's a place for them to meet for hall events. And so it really is, the area desks are a sort of centralized hub for student connection to the institution. Prior to design build phase, we would be partnering with the SESRC, which is the Social and Economic Sciences Research Center and Enrollment Management, to survey key constituents, including current, incoming, and prospective students, to learn more about their particular expectations, needs, and hopes for a facility. For example, we're preparing now to do focus groups with current high school students to get their input. Financing models are being developed this fall. We're working closely with Stacy and Matt and John, their team, to look at different options. In general, our proposed funding would be a combination of auxiliary operating reserves, operating revenue, and structured new debt. No state capital support is proposed or requested at this time. And certainly the timing and the amount of the new debt will be planned, taking into account the university's overall debt portfolio and debt capacity. And I know, having followed Stacy right up here, it's a challenging conversation to have. So we're looking at all the sort of possibilities and all the numbers. We do envision private and philanthropic funding as part of the vision. It will be one of our priorities in student affairs in the next couple of years, and used as a strategy to supplement the core funding through opportunities for naming and dedicated spaces. And the overall cost at this point is expected to be in the territory of about $57 to $60 million for this new dining facility. The location that we're envisioning, just so folks know, the rotunda would need to stay online while we are in construction because students need to have a place to eat. Krugel Hall has been vacated, and so built into the cost of the project is the demolition of Krugel Hall. It's kind of near the corner of Stadium Way and Nevada, diagonally across from Cougar Health Services and up a little bit. And so it would also be part of that entrance to campus, which is part of what we're thinking about, of making that a more attractive entrance to campus, which Krugel Hall is not at present. So that is what I've got. Our intention is to come to you all, if we can get our numbers mapped out and all of that, to come to you all with a future action item at your meeting in January, and then an action item hopefully in March, and be ready to hit the ground running, pending approval, of course. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I don't know how I am on timing.
You're doing great on timing.
Helen, can I just one comment and then ask you to answer a question that I think I know the answer to?
Sure.
Just that this is a strategic priority for the Pullman campus. I mean, I know the way you worded it is a
You're right.
priority for student affairs. This is about recruitment and about retention. This year, I think you said that it was the first time you started to hear these really super disparaging comments about the South Side, which is 60%. And I was there on move-in day and I heard some of them. Some of them didn't know I was the chancellor. I got on a sweatshirt and was helping people move in, and like the parents were reacting, the students were reacting. Maybe after living at home for a couple of years, that shock of moving into what seemed to be a dorm like they had lived in the 70s or 80s seemed harsh. So I think it is a recruitment and retention. And so that's a WSU wide priority to make sure we get that addressed. But can you say a little bit about, so students currently now on the south side pay less than those who live on the north side? Ellen and I have talked about this a little bit. I have been at universities where everybody pays the same and it's like a lottery system. But in this case, there actually is a kind of economic, if, you know, segregation,
Yeah.
if you will. And as we move forward with improving the south side, what is your sense of how we might try to balance that and not overprice us ourselves?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that. I just had a meeting last week with my team, and one of the things you all may remember from the consultants who came in to look at the housing and dining enterprise subsequent to the 1 year that we didn't meet our debt due to the pandemic. One of the recommendations from them was to do an analysis of our pricing structure, which is, to be honest, a bit ad hoc. It's not ad hoc in the sense that, I mean, it's based on you pay more if you get more, you pay more if you have a private bath, you pay more if your facility you're living in is newer, et cetera. But to really sort of try to simplify that and streamline that. And we actually are in the process of developing a model that will still have different price points based on location and desirability and the newness and so on. It won't eliminate the north side, south side disparity that we see. So what we are looking at though is more like a tiered system. And so there will be certain halls, and they tend to be the north side halls that would be in tier 1, tier 2, down to tier 3, and tier 3 would be many of the halls that are on the south side, which would be the lower priced ones. So I'm not sure I'm actually answering your question, but it is one of the things that we are looking at, is that students who can afford to will go in and they want to live in the nicer, newer halls. And so we end up with students who can afford to living in the nicer halls on the north side of campus, and students who are Pell eligible on other forms of financial aid. Often that is our first gen students, certainly our low income students. Too often our students of color end up having to choose among our lesser priced halls.
I
So
guess as we chip away at improving south side, we will.
what we do is we
over
shift that balance. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. But you gave me an opportunity to presage what we'll be bringing to you all when we're doing our dining hall pricing conversation in, I think, May.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Regent Shetler?
Yeah, thank you very much. Ellen, this is what I do. I've helped build millions and millions of square feet of office space for Amazon around the world. I love working on collaborative spaces, on communal spaces, placemaking. I would love to have you come over to Seattle sometime and visit our Seattle campus and show you our hospitality and our dining and our communal spaces, our meeting centers, how we create these centers of energy, and can talk to you about it on a cost per square foot basis and what it costs to be able to construct these spaces, and also take a look at ways in which these older facilities can still be renewed without having to take them down. You think about from a sustainability perspective and all of the embedded carbon and everything else that's already in these buildings that are standing that are 59 years old, there are ways to renew them and still be able to have them be affordable for not only the project costs, but for the students who live in them. So I'd love to help you to the extent that you need a helping hand.
Regent Shetler will absolutely take you up on that. As we get to the later phases, looking at the residence halls, I will admit that when we were first starting these conversations pre-pandemic, to be honest, I was a bit skeptical about the idea of remodeling some of the buildings, the residence halls on the south side. And the consultants who came in and we did a charrette and looked at some possibilities, we saw what they've done at some other universities with remodeling residence halls. If the bones are good, if if it's structurally sound, to be able to really completely transform some of those spaces. Our analysis really suggests that we do need to build a new dining facility, dining and community center, but that the residence halls is the place where we can start looking at what would of course be more cost effective, which is to be able to remodel. And we will definitely come visit your campus. I'll bring my dining and housing folks with me, and that would be a great field trip.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Just FYI, I attended WSU 71 to 75, from 71 to 74, I lived in Stevenson South. So I can imagine what that might be now. I mean,
It probably looks a lot like when you were there.
wow.
And that is one of the things, as Provost Chilton was saying, one of the things and we've heard this for a few years, but we hear it more and more, is wait, I was a Coug here back in, and I lived in this residence hall, and it doesn't look any different. And, we have halls that were men's halls that are now all gender, or women's halls, a combination, and there's urinals that are, they just need replacing. I'm just saying, they need updating.
Well, my son went there from 2007 to 2013 or 2012, something like that. And the hall that he did live in it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. So, I mean, I was afraid to go in there. I go, you live here? Anyway, I would like to see that change.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's certainly a priority. We are right on schedule.
Awesome.
And we're ready for a 15-minute break. I want to demonstrate my appreciation for everyone that has followed our timing. It's worked well, and we'll be back in 15 minutes after the Regents take a break. Thank you.
Yeah. And some of these aren't going to.
They're going to be fast.
These are going to be fast. So, yeah.
All right.
There is much excitement about the opportunities right now. Perhaps for some improvements to dining and residence halls. So appreciate that presentation. And we are off to WSU Pullman Champion Center Design Phase Approval Forecast. So Stacy and Associate Vice President for Facilities, Olivia Yang, and not athletic director, but welcome. Do we have both of our regents on, back on? Okay, thanks, Kyle. All right, ready.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is future action item for the Champion Center, and what we are seeking at the next time we have this on the agenda is approval to proceed with design phase of the Champion Center for a cost not to exceed $2 million. And that money is available in cash at this point in time. So since it is a future action item, I thought it just might be a good opportunity for you to maybe hear more about the project if you want. There's a description of it in your write-up. And then we've also described how much in cash has been raised and how much in pledges, just to give you a sense of what that will look like, with the budget, ultimate budget being between 8 and 12.7 million, depending on timeline and financing costs. And then you will see that there is a timeline there for when we do design build procurement, when it begins, and estimated construction. And we put that in there so you get a sense of kind of how long that phase will take and what the next steps will be. And then in the attachments, we have the aerial sites, you know, where the facility will be located. And then we also provided the cash and pledge schedule for your review. So again, this is for future action, but we have Olivia and Mitch here if you have questions about the project or kind of the next steps of what we would do with design. And then we anticipate bringing this for action item at the next meeting where we're doing action items. I don't know if that's January or March. January.
And you won't be there.
I won't be there, no, but you will, so.
And I'm happy to provide context. Pat is actually flying down to Arizona as we speak, so not available on Zoom. But this project, frankly, is very exciting for athletics for two reasons. One, it centralizes our efforts related to academics, professional development, nutrition, in addition to mental health services. Right now, those spaces are located in 3 different buildings on 5 different floors. When we did the study for these facilities, what the consultant found was we should have about 8,000 feet dedicated to academic space. And right now we have about 1,800 square feet. In addition, as you guys can understand, especially post-pandemic, this is us doubling down on our core principles. When a parent drops off a student athlete currently, they trust our coaches to act as surrogate parents, right? They're supposed to be responsible not only for their development over the 4 years they're at Washington State, but obviously adequately prepared for the next 40 years of their life. There's nothing that we can invest in more wholeheartedly than the holistic well-being of our student athletes. And we believe these 4 areas allow us to move the needle in the most significant way related to that.
So first, I need to apologize, Mitch, for not introducing you. I was like, wait, sorry. So Mitch Straub, Deputy Athletic Director. Glad to have you joining us. Are there any questions for Olivia, Stacy, or Mitch?
I just wondered, so this is renovating facilities that are already exist in comparison to what Ellen talked about. What's the age of the current facilities?
The current facilities that were located in Bowler was built in 1922, essentially, obviously post World War I. So it can survive a nuclear holocaust, which is great. Unfortunately, isn't necessarily conducive for a lot of remodeling. Bowler is attached to PEB, the physical education building, which houses Gibb Pool. And so the space that we have reserved for it actually is on the first floor facing Cougar Way in Colorado.
Okay.
And essentially would be the 8 racquetball courts on there.
Thank you.
questions or comments?
If I could make a comment, I've been able to generally share with the Regents some of the pending investments that some of our donors are going to make in athletics, and just want the board to realize Mitch leads that team. It's a team. It's a bunch of different individuals, but when you sort of see these multi-million-dollar commitments, Mitch has really done a great job of sitting down, partnering with folks, developing a compelling vision along with Pat and the rest of the staff, and helping land those. So that doesn't just happen happenstance. Nobody walks in with a multi-million-dollar check and just drops it off at the office. And so I just want to acknowledge Mitch's leadership and appreciate everything you do for WSU. So thank you.
Thank you. Surrounded by good people and great leaders, so makes it easier.
I'm pretty excited about some of the work that you've been doing, for sure. Okay, well, unless there's anyone on the Zoom call, I'm going to go ahead and move us towards the individual action items. Now, many of these you've heard what feels like multiple times, so I'm going to keep going. WSU Pullman Taylor Sports Complex Design Phase. And then we have the WSU Vancouver Life Sciences Building Project Budget Increase. So let's just go ahead and do the first one. The Taylor Sports Complex Design.
Okay, so you did see this in September as a future action item, and we're seeking approval to proceed with the design phase for the Taylor Sports Complex for a cost not to exceed 2.4 million, which is available in cash. Mitch and his team have raised over 20 million in cash and additional pledges. And so we think this is ready to go to the next step. So again, this will be something that you consider with your vote tomorrow. And again, there's a timeline in there for the next steps after design, after the design is completed, and then, when this project will return to the Regents. There's also the aerial site and the pledge schedule, just like there was for the last one, and pretty similar to what was presented in September, I think, with a couple of updates. Is that correct? Or
yes, and needless to say, the Taylor Sports Complex will replace the aging existing air supported structure.
The bubble.
Bubble.
I love it. Air supported structure.
Yeah.
Sounds so good.
That's what NASA does.
I have a note, maybe I should just mention this in our pre-meeting, that each of these action items, this action item, the life sciences building, the Wayland, not Wayland,
Schweitzer Hall.
Schweitzer Engineering Hall, excuse me, a previous agenda, and the university ethic policy. All of these that you have seen have not changed. So as we go through these, if there are questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna kind of keep us moving forward, since they have been items that you've had ample time to ask some questions. But we do have a new regent, so if you have any questions, please ask them. Okay. All right, I'm going to move us to the next one. So WSU Vancouver Life Sciences Building Project Budget Increase.
Did we have this last time?
We had it last year when we
Last
came
year.
back for the first project budget increase. That was use of local funds to do two things. One was to complete interior that had been shelved due to escalation. And the other piece was 2.7, which was half of the greenhouse. That was last year. And this time we're coming back with two things again. The other half of the greenhouse, 2.7. And in the supplemental session, the legislature made available $80 million for state agencies and institutions of higher ed for inflation. So we applied for that money and we got 2.2 plus million. And so it's the 2.7 and the 2.2 increase that we're asking for today. And if I may do a little infomercial free of charge. This project is piloting something that WSU is trying to do in the support of small businesses in public works procurement. One of the issues around being a small business, obviously, is cash flow. and, live or die by the cash you get paid every month. And so when you're a second or third or lower tier subcontractor, you frequently don't get paid for 90, 120 days. And we work very successfully with the contractor out there. Anderson, Jason Bearlocker is our project manager, he's over there, next to Jenny. We've devised a way to help the general contractor figure out how to set aside money to pay, I think, 3 small businesses. Oh, 5 diverse small businesses, subcontractors, how to get them paid sooner, so that, they're not stressed out financially and emotionally every month. We get them paid sooner. So it's just one of those little things that we're doing as part of an overall effort that WSU is doing to support small businesses. In other words, just really diverse businesses. So I just want to bring that up, that's kind of a concrete example of what we're doing.
And I would like to bring that up. That's another Enrique moment of would be an interesting story, because that is a model that could be followed by others. That
Yeah.
would be
Yes,
cool
we
to
hope so.
showcase.
Yeah, we hope so. And we're actually drafting legislation that would incentivize contractors to set up ways to help small businesses financially, as well as, just, yes, we want to give opportunity, but once they get a contract, we want them to survive and not go broke. And once they finish the contract, we want them to have learned something so they come out, they kind of graduate and become better, so they get more. And so it's all about, it's not just giving small businesses work, it's making them successful. And that's something that we've been engaged in for, 2-3 years. My other day job.
That's great.
Olivia, this is a really important story for you to tell. And I agree. I think this is an Enrique moment. I'm going to just for a second just share, as someone who owns a small business that is dependent on architecture and engineers, we just recently went 6 months where we are in that paid when paid scenario. And as a small disadvantaged DPE woman-owned minority firm that checks off a lot of federal contracts and state contracts, not getting paid is not something that you can really tell your employees, do you mind taking an IOU for 6 months because I'm not getting paid? That is a huge game changer for small businesses, because you can go broke and under by not getting paid for work that you've already done because the contractor isn't able to pay you. And so I think that in so many ways, this is demonstrating that commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and really our mission. So I think, thank you for mentioning that. I hadn't heard that, and really appreciate the leadership by the contractor that was selected and the work of this project, because I do think it's a model that we can lead in, and I will just attest to the fact that it's not being done in this state, across the state, by private contractors, and it's terrible. So
Bigger
thank you.
contractors don't want to be the banker for the diversity.
Right, sure.
And my response is, oh, so you want the little guy to be the banker, the one who can least afford to be the
Right.
banker. You want them financing the project. Oh.
Go Olivia.
Good one.
Okay. All right. Sorry. All right, let's go. That's great.
She does mean it. It is her other
So,
day
yeah.
job. so. And I think the
That's
good
not a
news
scarf,
is
that's a cape.
Yeah.
Now she whips it off and grabs. it. Yeah.
And I do think that you have seen the budget for the Vancouver Life Sciences Building on many occasions. And I think I just discussed with Mel, we think this is it. So we've got the money, lots of money from the state, almost all of it, and then the additional funds for the greenhouse, and I think we're set.
Okay, great. Are there any questions? This is a little bit of a nuance because it wasn't something we reviewed at the very last meeting.
I think, Mel, if you just gave maybe a minute or two on our fundraising, just generally, it turns out we've actually talked with a lot of different groups. And I think, until we have signed gift use agreements, we can't spend it, but we certainly have a lot of opportunities ahead of us, more so maybe than at the last Regents meeting. So it might be good just to give a general update on that part. even though it doesn't affect this, it does in a broader sense.
Yes, that's right. The part of the beauty of what you're approving today is that the state gave us more money to address the escalating costs. In addition to that, we're trying to offset some of our costs that we've taken from WSU dollars by a very concerted fundraising campaign. We've set a goal of $10 million. The momentum, I think, is really building. Just in Kirk's visit here this week, we had an extraordinary meeting with a collective group of individuals that are looking to come together to do something for the building. We have had good momentum over the last few weeks with a couple of different foundations with and the opportunity to apply out of cycle. So we haven't seen the dollars yet, but people are asking us to ask them for money to support this project. So we feel really good about the momentum that we have going at the moment. Kirk, was there something more specific that you'd like me to?
No, I just, I think the magnitude of some of the gifts that people are considering are considerable. And, I think by January we'll have, a little bit more, but I think it's going to perhaps give us an opportunity to do even more with the building than we originally thought. So it's some positive momentum, and I look forward in January to updating this group on this particular topic. So I just want everybody to feel good about it.
Yeah, thanks. It really is interesting that you don't usually go into a meeting with the donor who says, or a foundation that says, we're interested in going into the corpus of the foundation so that we can do something more significant for your project. And those are, each one is a unique story, but each of those is some version of when we leave, it's like, wow, that was unexpected. So things are coming together, and the gifts that we have in this process, we have more six-figure donors who have never given to our campus ever. And I think that really sets us up for the future for other projects. What we haven't had up to this point is a seven-figure donor, a lead donor. And with the organizations that Kirk and I are talking about here, these are gifts that are well into seven figures that they're interested in. And so that's pretty exciting for us.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, any questions? All right.
Thank you. I said I wasn't going to come up, but I'm glad I did.
All right, let's move to the WSU Pullman Schweitzer Engineering Hall Design Phase Approval.
Dean Rezac to come up. Yes, please.
I'm Dean Rezac, Mary.
Hello.
That's not me. So this is very exciting news for us, and ready to proceed with approval for, again, design phase of the Schweitzer Engineering Hall for an amount of 4.8 million. And I'd like to give Dean Rezac a chance to talk a little bit about the precinct and that design and what we're hoping to achieve, especially with the first building, with the Schweitzer Engineering Hall. And then also reminder that that Chris did talk about this because it's our top ask for our capital budget, the 40 million match. What's so exciting about this is it's our first time doing that match of the 40 million in donations and 40 million from the state. And also that they really want to try to do this without borrowing. So you will see a chart in there where we've literally mapped out the cash contributions, the July 2023, which is the big moment when we get the state money, and then how we can manage to do that using cash from the donations as they flow in.
Yeah, so you heard about this last time, so I won't talk much. I just want to say that we are very excited to have the opportunity to build a space that does many of the things that you heard Ellen talk about and athletics talk about in those two locations. It's really an academic building, but focused very much around student recruitment, student retention. The same stories, actually, one of our alums, Thor Culverhouse, Heather, I don't know if you know him, toured our campus with his son, and after the tour, the son turned to his father and said, "Dad, I am so sorry that you had to go there." Right? That was so sad. Clearly, the child did not come to join us, but it's the same. We have a 1940s building that we are replacing, so we're super excited that we're nearly done with the fundraising campaign, that we appear to be on track for funding from the state. The only thing I want to talk about is that this is, just like Ellen, this is the first step in a multi-building plan to modernize not only this first student-focused building, but also the research spaces we have in our portfolio. We're not quite as old as the Southside complex, but the average age of buildings in the engineering complex is 54. And the oldest one is over 100, the youngest one is about 15. So our goals are to not only improve this space, but also reduce the square footage that we have in our portfolio, because we have a lot of space that's really ineffectively designed for what we're trying to accomplish. And that means that we pay more in fixing deferred maintenance and in maintenance and operation than we should be paying. So it's a long-term goal. And I hope you're going to see me repeatedly over the course of the next several years asking for approval to spend more money.
Do you want to say something?
Yes, I just like to, well, first of all, the fact that we have a multi-year, multi-building modernization plan is a great thing. We hope that this is a microcosm of the things we hope to do across the campus and across the system. Secondly, you've heard today 4 projects. Donor capital funding is a thing. And clearly it's new for us and we have to learn new things. Many times Mary and I will be talking and we'll say, never done this before, got to figure this out. You know, so it's new skills that we need to learn, whether it's timing, cash flow, borrowing, not borrowing. I mean, we're happy to learn it because it's money that augments, supplements state funding. And thirdly, in the, as Mary said, in the highly glamorous world of deferred maintenance, we hope that this new building will allow us to move out of a bad building that we can then either close or ideally even demolish. Because so far we've only started demolition of Johnson Hall, if some of you know, for the new ARS building. As Mayor Ellen pointed out, we did vacate Krugel, but we hope to be, just kind of chunking along on Spokane along those buildings out there. I think that, when I think about engineering, I think like many of our colleges, it's like the rhyme of the ancient mariner, space everywhere, not a bit that's any good. So, and appreciate the partnership with Mary and certainly appreciate the president's leadership in donor funding.
Okay. I'll just, you talked about the student and the parent and the experience of walking through it. For those of us that work there every day, this is wonderful to hear that we're moving towards having a campus that's renovated, that you're not walking past a new space that's run down. You're not struggling on a daily basis to deal with things that aren't working. I mean, this is really commendable. And thank all 3 of you. This is really good news, I think, for those of us who are down in those spaces day in and day out.
Judy, we're going to renovate your slide rule pretty soon.
Loan you my abacus.
Just before we move on, I want to express my appreciation for Mary's leadership. This is a remarkable fundraising story to think about, raising nearly $40 million in about 18 months for a new academic building. And so We talk about athletics facilities. I think, as I mentioned, the board, all of these things tie together. They help drive donor interest in newer facilities. And when we do something for intercollegiate athletics, a lot of times it helps conversations start with people that realize that if you get really nice facilities that are meaningful, we're going to have to get these 20 million, $5 million types of commitments. So Mary's been on the road a lot to make all this happen. So thank you for your leadership. It makes a big deal of difference at WSU.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, but we're nowhere near done. So you will see us again. I hope.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Vote yes tomorrow.
Assuming our new.
There's going to be little campaign signs or.
All right, here we go. Moving on to the university ethic policy.
Yes.
Back up is our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer and so Cheryl and Executive Director for Policy and Governance, Danielle.
Should I stay here? I'll
Yeah,
just stay
you
here.
can
Okay.
stay.
I was all for the ethics policies. but-
Well, I already gave a little preview of this. I mostly just want to turn it over to Danielle. This is super important for us, I think, as a system and on the compliance side, and we just have made a few changes last time, so I'll turn it over.
Yeah, so we brought this as a future action item in September, and we've made, a few minor adjustments in terms of like adding some examples and that kind of thing, but really no substantive changes have been made since September. So just to kind of get everyone reoriented and remind you what the policy does, it serves as an umbrella policy. So it's going to consolidate a lot of ethics requirements, including laws and policies and other things that we have in the system. And so what's nice is we're going to eliminate a lot of individual policies and just make it kind of a one-stop shopping sort of deal. It creates and codifies a mandatory ethics training requirement for all employees, which is something that the Board of Regents, I believe, requested. I don't want to exaggerate, but it may have been 5 years ago.
You've been what?
5 years ago. Yeah, it was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic.
So
Yes,
it was just took a long time to pull this together. And so we're finally getting it done. Similar to the Board of Regents conflict of interest policy, it prohibits conflicts of interest and it creates a process for disclosure and recusal when possible. It also has a conflict of commitment section, and there's a process for that. And that's one of those sections that there are various places, like in the faculty manual and other places that sort of address it, but we really don't have a comprehensive conflict of commitment policy. So we're excited to have that. And the reason that this policy requires Board of Regents approval is that we're implementing amendments to the Ethics Act that went into effect last summer, basically allowing universities to create a administrative process that creates a safe harbor for faculty that are engaging in outside compensated activities related to their scholarship. So the Ethics Board requires that the Board of Regents approve the policy that the university develops, and then we'll send it if the Regents approve it. Next step for us will be to send it over to the State Executive Ethics Board, where they'll take a look at it and they may have some suggestions as well. So there could be some additional changes. We did have earlier this week, Charles and I and Sherry Gordon and Shelby Shiraki from the AGO, we did an ethics workshop with the chairs and directors. We had a great turnout. We had about just under, I think, 30 participants in that. And we floated the ethics policy. We worked through a number of complex scenarios involving faculty outside activities, and it seemed to go over really well. So as a result of that, we're working on a form that'll accompany the policy, and we made some minor changes to that. But again, nothing substantive. It's the same thing that you saw back in September. So if the Regents approve the policy, want to approve the policy, we're asking for a motion tomorrow be to adopt a resolution approving the policy, and then also delegating authority to the president or designee to make any changes needed prior to implementation in the event that we've got some changes from the Executive Ethics Board or thereafter after we're looking at it. So that's it. Anything else, Charles?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, questions, comments?
I think just a quick comment. I think the examples that you embedded in there were really helpful.
Good.
And I think that will help people with, at least, it may, there's always going to be something that's very complex coming through, but, this will give them an idea of what's appropriate and what's not, and a direction to begin looking in.
Yeah, I think those concrete examples are incredibly helpful. And in fact, if any changes that we've made have been to add additional examples of people saying, wow, we really need an example that talks about this.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think really resonates with people when they look at it.
I guess the biggest thing is to sort of drive home that if in doubt, ask.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that is the one thing we harped on during the workshop as well. Like every slide that had a summary at the end, it said, reach out to the ethics compliance advisor who Cheryl established that position right after she started. And so it's a terrific resource for people that we just keep harping on it.
I think what is something that in our workshop, we realized, and this, without this safe harbor, it truly was the case that a faculty member who wrote a textbook that was a good one and that was successful and that they earned royalties on had the potential to be in violation of the Washington State Ethics Act, which is exactly contradictory to what we expect of our faculty. So this safe harbor is super important, and we're working really hard to get that message out to faculty, and we'll continue to work really hard because we want them writing successful textbooks, right? And earning those royalties from those textbooks. So we're anxious to get this rolled out.
I think our faculty regent has some expertise in writing textbooks. So.
And appreciates
Successful
to use her
faculty.
textbook at her
Yes, I know.
institution.
Well, this is another big step forward. So thank you. This is a terrific work.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right.
One more.
Do you want to stay? Yeah.
I'm going to stay.
Yeah,
I'm going
good,
to introduce it.
Okay.
Then ask Scott and Jeremy to go ahead and come up just to give a presentation, but just to remind you that the action that we're seeking is approval of a contract extension, I guess you could say. It's actually a new contract, but with PVM for an amount not to exceed $5,625,000 for the next 3 years. We've had an agreement with this marketing company for the last 4 years, which was, I think, 10.1 million. And I know that at the last Regents meeting, there were a lot of questions. And so I believe that Jeremy and Scott have both a presentation, and you should have a letter that was added to your packet that describes.
It looks like this.
Yeah, and I'll just let you talk about that.
Yeah, Jeremy Tampson wasn't with me last time. He's just been on board 2 months. So he's our new Director of Innovation and Commercialization. And he writes contracts like these marketing ones. So with a lot of help from like your office, but even Charles' office more and more these days. So, and I think Wendy Powers is on my boss, our dean. I believe she was going to try and join us. Awesome. Okay, so I've just got 6 slides then that a lot of you have seen. Sorry, but I'll try and run through them fast, and it'll jog questions that.
Scott, we have time. I've actually been moving us along pretty efficiently, so we have time to spend on this. And I think from my perspective, there has been some really good conversations from the last board meeting to this board meeting. The questions that were mentioned among the board, I believe have been addressed, and there have been the ability for those direct conversations to occur. And from my own perspective, not being anyone who is in agriculture, apples, or apples and marketing. I have appreciated the extra time and effort that has been spent by this team with me to help me understand this, and in particular by Dean Powers. So I'm hoping that I think it is helpful for you to go through the slides. So please don't feel like you need to rush through any slides, and that the board can engage in further questions if there are any. But I think we've all done some good homework from the last presentation to this one, and I appreciate all of the time that's been dedicated to helping the board feel comfortable with the questions that were asked. So thank you. Scott.
Yeah, I would reciprocate that back to you all as well. Thank you for taking the time to help us focus on this topic.
All right. Let me run through these slides then. All the land grant universities are using some type of intellectual property protection now to protect their, well, to commercialize their new plant varieties, especially the valuable ones. Apples are kind of unique in that you buy them by name, compared to most other produce. So we protected a couple ways. We protected it with a plant patent on the variety, WA38, and then we trademarked the name, Cosmic Crisp. The plant patent's going to be up in 10 years. They don't last that long. So but the trademark is forever. So this marketing program that we're asking to start is totally focused on trademark, the value of the trademark and associating that trademark with good food, with good fruit. So we have a commercialization partner that we work with on this, and it's a company, PVM, that a panel of growers and packing and marketers helped us choose. PVM does a lot of things for us, all those things listed on the side, but some of these things they do are things that we're really not very good at or really don't want to do, like have a person in a packing house inspecting the fruit and deciding whether it can be sold with the trademark or not. That's something we really don't want to do, or designing all the packaging even and making everybody use the same packaging, that type of, things we just don't do. They also do all the international commercialization. So they protect the trademark in all these countries. They protect the plant patent if that's possible. To do that, you have to get the trees into the country, and which isn't always trivial. And you also have to, have a company that you trust in that country that can help you commercialize it. So, and that's PVM's a really international company. So this is what they excel at. So the marketing contract that we started with them 4 years ago that we're going to redo now, it's separate than this commercialization contract that we started with them like 8 years ago. And this slide just kind of shows what they spent their money on last year in 2022, broken down into their categories. Most of the money goes to a Harbor Creative Group, which is a marketing group that specializes in food and fruit and stuff. They do all the design. They set up all this partnerships with companies to like sell the slices, sell the juice, Cosmic Crisp juice, or the cider, like Two Towns cider. They do all the digital. They plan a lot of the digital media. The digital media slice there is smaller, but it's something that our econ faculty have been kind of studying the effects of the marketing program so far. They think that that's one of the best areas, and they want us to enhance that more. But PVM also does print media, like Good Housekeeping, stuff like that, and has sampling at giant trade shows, things. And they provide content to try and get earned media, like get articles in big newspapers or on TV news items, things like that. And they also they don't do research, but they buy research from companies like Category Partners or Nielsen's, so that they can it can help them direct their marketing and also kind of get an idea how well they're doing. So this is just an example of that research. This is a survey of 2,000 individuals that buy premium apples. And what it shows is the blue bars are the percent of that focus group that's heard of that apple variety. The turquoise bars are the percent of people that have actually bought and eaten that variety. So Cosmic Crisp is in there in the middle, and you can see that 27% of the people have heard of it, 14 have eaten it. We think that's pretty good. Category Partners thinks that that's good evidence that the marketing campaign is working. And the reason that's good compared to something like Honeycrisp that everybody's heard of, everybody in that focus group, is because it's only been on the market 2.5 years. So it's people have found out about it pretty fast. The other part of this though is there's never been an apple that's had 19 million trees planted this fast and is ramping up in volume so fast. So where we really need to be is, in 2 years, they think we need to be up here with Pink Lady, who's been, because we'll have that much volume, right? We sold 4 million boxes this last year. 2023, we'll have to sell 5 million. 2024, we'll have to sell 7.5 million. And so on. It's just ramping up like that.
And it'll level off at about that 7.5 million, 8 million level.
It'll slow down. I think, yeah. We don't control how people plan it. It's only been able to plan it in Washington so far and some international companies. But in the future, I don't know. I think eventually it's going to be. Well, Honeycrisp is only like 14 million, so it'll, we just want to see what happens in the next 3 years, really. So that's the immediate worry.
Scott. So on the bottom of that slide, you list there several recognizable brands, and just before we blow through that, it's a similar style to what we're attempting to do at WSU, right?
Well, these are all the ones that have been done by other universities. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've got Snapdragon owned by Cornell. It's licensed in a similar way and marketed in a similar way. We've got Pink Lady. That was actually an apple. The Crips Pink apple was brought into the US and was made into a branded apple by increasing the quality standards and applying that Pink Lady trademark name to it.
That was PBM, actually.
Yeah,
they were the first one to brand an apple in the Northwest. It was the Wild West before that. There was no
and the real cautionary tale woven into here, though, is the Honeycrisp owned by University of Minnesota. Their plant patent expired, and they failed to keep the plant name distinct from the trademark name, and so they could not qualify for a trademark for the Honeycrisp name. So what that means is that when the patent expired in 2008 on the plant itself, University of Minnesota hasn't gotten a penny back from those Honeycrisp sales in the US. So that's what we want to avoid, and that's why we've engaged with this strong trademark protection and this strong brand identity creation.
So this is what we think we want to spend. 2.5 million annually is what we have been spending the last 4 years. Because we split the royalties 3-to-1 with PBM, they will pay for a quarter of it, that 2.5 million. So it'll be about 1.9 million to us a year and about 600,000 to them. So the chart on the bottom shows our projected royalties for the next few years. So the green part of that bar is what we are asking to spend on marketing. And the leftover part of the bar, the red part, is the net royalties, right? So if we would have had 2001 and 2021 and 2020 on here, it would have been all green bar. We pretty much spent almost all of our royalties on marketing. Now we're getting to where the royalties are big enough that it's a smaller percentage. So last year we spent less than half of our royalties on marketing. But this prediction of royalty generation is based on the number of apples we sell growing, but also it's based on a $36 a box price, which is the price we got this year. Okay, so if the price does crash, these projections won't be as big as they are.
And to couch that risk, we're putting a contingency into the contract with PVM to say that if we don't reach a certain amount of net revenues every year, we're going to cut down on the marketing spend. And we'll have the opportunity, we have a review with them every 6 months, and we'll be tracking that really closely as we work through this new agreement.
You mentioned also when we spoke offline that we have some sort of agreement also with the growers. Is that true, or is that with PVM?
PVM acts as the licensee, the sublicensor to those growers. And so we license PVM and they license to the growers and the packers and in some cases the marketers.
Okay. So what is our, because I know our royalty, we don't get a royalty if the price per box falls below X. $20 a box.
$20,
yeah.
correct. Yeah.
So, which is the only thing that makes me uncomfortable about this whole arrangement is that, we're at risk for no return for our marketing dollar, and we have no control on the volume of apples being sold. So is there any ability to kind of wrap anything into that negotiation, or is that up for renegotiation, or what's going on there?
No, that $20 a box when this was started, I should know, but 8 years ago or something, when that royalty was figured out, that was a break-even price for growers. So that was kind of them saying, we're not giving you royalties if we're not making any money growing it, right? So it would be tough to change that because the break-even price is above $20, right? So yeah, so
I don't think that's necessarily the thing that has to change. I'm just trying to think of, whether there's something for marketing dollars to be something that they're contributing to, or, we all have the same problem, right?
yeah,
Which is that we're all growing a ton of apples and we need to take market share away from these other apples.
yep,
So we're all incented in the same direction. It's just that we're the only ones paying for that market share. We in PVM are the only ones paying for taking that market share away from the other apples, whereas the growers are who all have to pay their bills, quite understandably. They are going to have the incentive to, put as many apples on the market as they can.
yes. The packing houses and marketing desks that sell the apples for the growers do charge them a price to do some advertising. At least most of the packing shops do. So they do some advertising. It's not very helpful, apparently, as Steve Lutz tells us, that it's not really that helpful for increasing the value of the trademark because, they're trying to sell their own brand at the expense of their neighbor, the other 15 packing houses. They want you to buy Stamilt apples, not Cosmic Crisp. And they're selling a lot of different apples, not just Cosmic Crisp. But the other thing they do is undercut each other to get their apples on the shelf in Kroger or whatever. So in a sense, it's a race to the bottom in price, when they advertise that way. So
I think you're highlighting one of our risk areas, right? That we've identified as well, is that we don't want the box price to fall below $20, right? We want it to be consistently at around this, what this projection is showing.
36, whereas they want it 22. or?
Well, and that's where they will get it if we allow the individual growers and packers to do their own marketing. Because what they'll do is they'll use their allowance basically to undercut one another, as Scott said, so that they can ship the boxes that they've harvested. So and another thing that Steve talks about in this category partners report is the desire for over the past 2 years to have a private label. And so what that means is that one of the growers would create their own trademark and use that trademark to identify our apple. And so that's explicitly disallowed in the agreements today, in part because we have this strong centralized campaign. We have a strong centralized trademark for the entire production of the apples. And then for those that don't meet those quality standards, we have the secondary markets, such as the slices and the juices and the ciders. So we are trying to hedge that risk.
Wow, there's just a lot to understand here. And I realize this is like, a tiny flea on the tail of the giant cougar that is, WSU. So I don't want to belabor this, but it just seems like there's a lot of, I hope that the next contract we enter into for the next blockbuster apple, that we give a lot of thought for how to align incentives.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that in this particular contract, you are putting some escape hatches into it for if it's not going well, you have a way to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem to me that it's optimally designed to make sure that we aren't, trying to stem the tide of everyone kind of going in a different direction than we are going in.
Yeah. And we're having a conversation next week with the with our apple breeder and the cultivar licensing committee who directed this this structural licensing agreement. And we're going to be talking about exactly these issues. So it'll be fresh in our minds when we're there next week.
We probably have 2 or 3 years to figure it out, but there's another apple coming.
I'm wondering if we could take down the slides and I think, Scott, you mentioned Dean Powers is also on, and we have a couple of
Can you do that?
around. Yeah,
Yeah, can you just,
pull the slides down.
sorry.
Hi, Brett.
I'm back.
Yeah, I was curious, Dean Powers, if you had any comments that you might want to share at this point. We've kind of gone through the slides and your perspective was helpful when you and I visited.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think there's been a lot of work and a lot of learning that's gone on through this first contract, and we still have more learning to do in the next contract. I like the approach of talking through what new negotiations could be in the second contract, but also leaving it open to continue to collect data on whether or not we're getting a return on that investment. I think, as we talked earlier this week, Regent Shower, I shared that I think what we're looking for at this point is some assurance that the board is comfortable with us moving forward, but I don't think that necessarily means that we're going to stop looking at ways to improve the contract and think through how we make sure we do get that return. And there's still some more data perhaps that's coming from the School of Economic Sciences about that.
Great, thank you. Are there questions, comments? Stacy, did you have any other feedback before I kind of open it up?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right.
I think they went through all the due diligence that we
had been
asked
talking
for,
about.
so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is on the agenda for an action item tomorrow. So I want to make sure that we take the time, and I'm not rushing us through if there are additional questions or comments.
I was trying to raise my hand.
Okay, I was like, I think you were just clapping, so I'll take it. All right. Yes. Sir.
I would echo Regent Redmond's concern. I'm not at all sympathetic to the $20 a box clause. I have lease agreements with landlords in my small enterprise. And I owe them a third of the profit, whether I make money on the 2/3 or not. It's just the way it is. So I don't see any reason at this point to give someone that wants to market the apple an out clause if things get a little rough. Especially a firm that, I don't know if they're still marketing Pink Lady or not. They're kind of competing with themselves if this is supposed to be our premier brand. And I would certainly ask that you address that clause if negotiations are still happening. I was also, it kind of went by quickly. I didn't realize there were two parallel contracts, one, whatever we're calling the issue before us, and then a marketing contract as well. I didn't know if the college still had control over or input over some of the things that the marketing enterprise is doing. And I would rather see the economic analysis alluded to have the college. In other words, I don't want us to be billed for activities that you think are frivolous or ineffective. Much like if I hire an attorney, he still does what I want. He might give me advice, but I only pay what I want them to do. And I think the marketing side should be the same. That would be my feedback on what I've heard so far.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Zach?
Can I ask for clarification, Madam Chair?
Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
numbers were thrown on a potential 3-year deal. Was it 5-point-something million for the 3 years, 5-point-something million a year?
Yeah, it'd be 1.9 roughly million a year from WSU royalties.
Yeah, and the other quarter coming from PBM royalties.
And as I understand it, the ask for the Regents is to authorize negotiating and executing the contract with the total cost not to exceed 5.6
For the 3-year.
Correct.
for the 3 years.
Yeah.
All right. Hearing no other comments or feedback, this is going to head to action item tomorrow. And I appreciate the questions. I think it's important that there's time and space to ask the questions and that there was time between the two meetings for us to explore those. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. We are actually at the conclusion of the agenda items for the Finance and Compliance Committee or Finance and Administration Committee. I am actually not going to have us take a break. I'm going to move us directly into our executive session. And in order for me to do that, I need to read exactly what is going to happen next. So the Regents will now hold an executive session to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation in which the university is or could be a party. This session will be closed. The executive session will conclude at approximately 4:50 unless it is extended by further announcement. If any action is taken as a result of these discussions, it will be taken tomorrow during open session. Immediately following the executive session, the meeting will adjourn. Thank you.
For your help.
Thank you all.
Thank you for all the
Yeah.
work that you did.
You know, John we'd given up on this guy and helped him. And John's the one that needs to go back one more time.
We have a reception.
Go back into life.
Yeah, so Kel will take us, and Lance will take us after the reception, so we gotta run. Yeah. You don't have to worry.
I finally.
it's resolved.
No, it told us
Okay, can I?
we had it turned off, so it's telling me it's back on now.
Why
Oh.
would we want a clause that says that we won't, they can't apply? Wouldn't we be smart enough just to not?
Are we?
We're
good?
recorded, Judy, we're back on.
Are we back on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are back with the Board of Regents meeting. I am adjourning the executive session, and the Board of Regents will be meeting tomorrow morning. And appreciate everyone's time today.